humanity sends the first space expedition to Mars, which mysteriously perishes. Rescuers struggle to reach the red planet and discover an astonishing find that reveals the secret of the origin of humans and life on Earth.
I don't know what the hell we just did.
A party is held at the house of astronaut Luke Graham in honor of his departure to Mars. Families of his friends and colleagues gather, and the man says goodbye to those staying behind, including his friend Jim McConnell, who had long been preparing for this flight but had to leave the project due to his wife's illness. The friends wish Luke a safe flight and remember the deceased woman. She would have been happy that the mission takes place. In 2020, the first manned expedition arrives on the red planet. Soon people discover a strange white formation near the base in the Cydonia region, which they suspect is the extrusion of a layer of water which will be useful for future human colonization. Transmitting the news of the find to the command center aboard the International Space Station, 4 crew members head to the location of the formation for further research. Arriving on site, people see a tall mountain which radar identifies as metallic. Then the astronauts begin to hear a strange low sound, but they think is just interference from their Mars rover. And when they increase the power of their equipment, the sand beneath their feet starts to move. At first, this doesn't cause much concern. The astronauts stay in place, examining the mountain, above which a sand whirlwind is growing. But soon it begins to behave like a sentient being, seemingly examining the newcomers and then attacking them, killing 3 astronauts within seconds, and then emitting a powerful electromagnetic pulse, destroying most of the working electronics aboard the ship. After the whirlwind subsides, a huge human face carved out of dense material appears from under the layer of sand. The space station receives an unintelligible message from Luke, but they do not understand what happened and whether Luke is alive. The leadership realizes that the rescue expedition needs to be organized, but how this can be done technically is unclear. Then Jim proposes a solution to the problem, as he had developed plans for evacuation from Mars. The station commander agrees to consider it but opposes Jim's participation in the expedition because the man refused to undergo tests and left the project. Woody Blake insists on including his friend in the crew, as his refusal to go on the first flight was for a good reason. He was very worried about his wife. Moreover, it was he and his wife who studied and designed the flight to Mars. So Jim knows more about this planet than everyone else, which will undoubtedly help in the rescue mission. Hearing his arguments, the commander agrees, and the rescue ship with a team of 4 people heads to Mars. In addition to Woody and Jim, the crew includes specialist Terry Fisher, Woody's wife, and Phil Ohlmeyer. Along the way, Jim kindly envies the love between Woody and Terry, observing how tenderly they treat each other. Soon, the surface of Mars becomes visible from the ship, and people note that the expedition camp is intact, and even see 3 burial mounds next to the building. It is unclear what happened to Luke. Maybe there was simply no one to bury him. Soon, a magnetic storm covers the planet, and the astronauts can no longer see anything. Command gives permission to land. Woody goes to share the news with Jim and catches him watching a family movie from which it becomes clear that his wife was also an astronaut, and together with her husband, they dreamed of flying to Mars. The ship is preparing to enter orbit around the red planet, but then a swarm of micrometeorites appears in its path, and one of the meteorites punctures the hull, injuring Phil's arm. The station begins to lose air, and Woody goes into open space to find and fix the breach. However, the breach is so small that it cannot be visually detected, and then Terry squeezes out juice which floats to the hole and seeps through it, indicating the breach. However, the crew does not notice another breach in the fuel line of one of the main engines. When the engine ignites, the fuel displaced into space explodes, destroying the ship. The crew has no choice but to quickly don their spacesuits and venture out into open space, hoping to maneuver to the supply module left in orbit from the first expedition. They find the module, but it is moving on a lower orbit than theirs, and too fast. Woody uses up all the fuel in his rocket pack to reach the module and secures a rope to it. However, he fails to stop his own flight and continues to fall towards Mars. Terry, wanting to save her husband, detaches her rope and goes after him. But Woody, realizing that if she continues to try to save him, she will face certain death, removes his helmet and perishes. Crying, Terry watches her husband's body fall to the planet and then returns to the others. The three astronauts land on the planet using the module. Although the module itself will not be able to take off again, the rescuers brought with them new motherboards for the first expedition ship, replacing the burnt-out ones. Upon arriving at the base of the first expedition, they explore it, but find no one. Although the living quarters are completely intact, Jim goes to the greenhouse and is amazed that all the plants are doing well, everything is functioning and working. The astronaut removes his helmet, and in the reflection on the water he sees Luke with an axe attacking him, not believing that this is a real person, not a vision. The man is seized, and only then does he begin to believe that they have come for him. The astronauts understand that Luke is not entirely mentally stable, as he has spent more than a year on Mars in complete isolation from the world. After recovering from the sandstorm attack, he buried the deceased and began studying the strange structure. He shows the rescue team the video recording of the discovery that cost his crew members their lives, and people are astonished, realizing that they are looking at the face of a humanoid. He then demonstrates his most important find, a recording of the sound he heard near the formation. After several months of analyzing the sound, he understood that it represents a diagram of human DNA on a rectangular coordinate system in space. Someone left it here as their signature. But later, remembering how Phil created the DNA of his ideal lover from candy, Jim realizes that this is not a signature. In reality, it is a peculiar test left by the creators instead of a lock guarding the entrance to somewhere. It turns out that the first expedition perished because they answered incorrectly. Instead of complementing the DNA proving that they were humans, the astronauts directed radar at the face. Since the answer was wrong, the structure's security system, the sandstorm, destroyed the intruders. The team heads to the Sphinx, but first they send a robot and transmit a signal with the supplemented DNA through it. A bright light shines from an entrance that appears in the face. Everyone except Phil, who stays behind to fix the ship, goes to the face. Jim gives Phil the order to take off at a precisely determined time, even if they don't return. Then the people enter a white room, the door closes, and the astronauts lose contact with the ship. Soon the room fills with Earth's atmosphere, and the people remove their helmets. Immediately behind them, another airlock opens, and upon passing through it, the astronauts find themselves in a dark room where they see a massive three-dimensional projection of the solar system. Then a hologram of a Martian appears, silently explaining to the people that in the distant past, a massive asteroid struck Mars, destroying the planet's ecosystem, which strongly resembled the Earth's. The Martians had to evacuate their race to other star systems, but they also sent a ship from Mars to neighboring Earth, containing the seeds of future life. Hundreds of millions of years later, multicellular plants and animals appeared on the planet, and no one could explain how it happened. Many years have passed since this panspermia. The new forms that emerged from the sent DNA evolved and became humans. They were supposed to return home to Mars one day so that the Sphinx would recognize them as the descendants of the grandiose experiment. The hologram reaches out to the Earthling, conveying that they belong to the same species. The Martian hologram disappears, and in front of them opens the hatch of a spaceship, on which someone from them can fly to the new home of the Martians. At this time, Phil unsuccessfully tries to contact his friends and prepares for takeoff. The people hear his warning that the storm is getting stronger and will soon engulf the ship. They realize that they need to hurry. But Jim refuses to return to Earth when the opportunity to fly to another galaxy arises. He is sure that this is an invitation and he was born precisely to reach the new world. Jim says goodbye to his friends. Terry gives him a small rocket pendant to remember, which once belonged to Woody, and the astronauts leave. Meanwhile, Phil repeats the call, but not receiving an answer, he hesitates to press the launch button. And Jim enters a light elevator that lifts him onto the Martian ship. The two remaining astronauts barely make it back to the ship due to the sandstorm, and only because Phil, contrary to the order, delays the takeoff. Meanwhile, Jim steps onto a circle that appears before him and suddenly realizes that he can't move as water rises around him. The man braces himself for drowning and holds his breath, but then he takes a breath and starts breathing underwater. He smiles, understanding that this is a new form of life. Images of his past life flash before his eyes, and the man seems to say goodbye to everyone once again. His crew, having taken off, watches through the porthole as the Martian ship with Jim on board flies away at high speed toward a distant galaxy and wishes him a safe journey. This good, kind-hearted science fiction film that was shot many years ago does not stand out for its dynamic plot, but despite numerous scientific inaccuracies, it is interesting to watch and keeps the tension until the last seconds. The story begins with a gripping and mysterious scenario. Ethan, a Secret Service agent from Seattle, regains consciousness in a forest after a car accident. Sporting a bruised face and feeling disoriented, he manages to make his way through the pine forest and finds himself in the seemingly peaceful town of Wayward Pines, Idaho. His appearance in town draws curious looks from passers-by, and upon entering a restaurant and collapsing from exhaustion, he learns from a waitress where he is. Ethan wakes up in a hospital bed in Wayward Pines, where a nurse named Pam tends to him, explaining he has minor injuries from the car accident. Distressed, Ethan inquires about his partner, Stallings, who was with him during the accident, only to learn of Stallings' tragic death. When he asks for his cell phone and belongings, he's advised they're at the police station, but he's encouraged to rest instead. Despite being the only patient in the hospital and against Pam's advice, Ethan leaves to go to the police station. There, he finds he can't access his belongings during the day, leading him to a nearby bar. Meanwhile, Ethan's boss Adam informs his wife Teresa that Ethan has been in an accident, but they haven't found his body yet. At the bar, Ethan borrows a phone from a waitress named Beverly to try and contact his family, but fails. Beverly empathizes with his situation, and it gives him her address in case he needs further help. He tells her his identity and that he is looking for two fellow agents, Evans and Kate, who is also Ethan's lover. Later, he notices her note mentioning the absence of crickets in Wayward Pines. On his way to the motel, he hears cricket sounds, but they are coming from a hidden speaker. The next morning, unable to pay for his hotel, Ethan visits Beverly's address only to find an abandoned cabin with the decaying body of Evans inside. Returning to the police station, he encounters an indifferent Sheriff Arnold who denies having Ethan's belongings and is unresponsive about the body. Ethan's attempts to make phone calls again prove fruitless. Back at the bar, Ethan finds a new operator and Beverly's mysterious absence. After an argument, Ethan is knocked unconscious. He wakes up in the hospital once more, this time restrained. Dr. Jenkins, a psychiatrist, insists on performing surgery due to a supposed blood clot. Despite Ethan's protests, injected with a sedative, he's left in the operating room. Surprisingly, Beverly rescues him, and together they knock out Pam and they escape the hospital. They reach a secluded wooden house where Beverly shares her own experience. She reveals she arrived in Wayward Pines in 1999, searching for an escape for a year. She also tells him she and Evans tried to escape, but he was killed. As Ethan falls under the sedative, he tells her it is actually 2014 now. Ethan wakes to find Beverly gone. Adam and investigators in Seattle are puzzled by the lack of evidence indicating Ethan's presence in the car during the accident. Meanwhile, in Wayward Pines, Ethan spots Kate, the other missing agent, at a nearby party. She appears older than he remembers, and Ethan cautiously follows her to a house that she enters with a man named Harold. When Ethan confronts Kate, she denies knowing him and warns him about the town's extensive surveillance with cameras and hidden microphones. Shockingly, she reveals she has been living in Wayward Pines for 12 years, leaving Ethan bewildered and alarmed. Determined to escape, Ethan steals a parked car, but his attempt to leave Wayward Pines is unsuccessful as he finds himself inexplicably back in town. Frustrated, he tries to flee on foot, only to be stopped by a massive electrified wall surrounding the town. Sheriff Arnold confronts him for the car theft and dismisses his claims of being a Secret Service agent. The next day, Ethan returns to the cabin where he found his colleague's body, still Undisturbed, he discovers a mysterious notebook in his friend's boot, but is interrupted by Arnold, who arrives with a gun, claiming a forensic team is coming. Ethan is forced to leave and heads back to the hotel. At the bar, he unexpectedly encounters Beverly again. She covertly arranges a secret meeting and gives him money, hinting at a plan involving Evans's notebook. Using the money, Ethan visits a cafe and manages to call the Secret Service, only to realize the operator is an imposter. He becomes suspicious when the cashier hastily takes the banknote from him. Later, Ethan tries to connect with Kate at the toy store where she works. Despite his efforts, Kate remains distant and secretive, adhering to the town's strict rules against discussing the past. Ethan's confusion deepens when he visits Evans's home, where Evans's wife denies knowing him and claims she witnessed her husband's suicide. Seeking answers, Ethan confronts Arnold, who instructs him to stay at the hotel and informs him that Evans's body has been sent to the morgue. At the morgue, Ethan retrieves the notebook from Evans's clothes. In a startling turn, Ethan sees his wife, Teresa, and son, Ben, being brought into the hospital on stretchers, but he can't find them anywhere. Dr. Jenkins warns Ethan that his condition is deteriorating and insists he needs surgery immediately. Back in Seattle, Teresa grows increasingly anxious about Ethan's whereabouts, with their son Ben suspecting Ethan might have run away with Kate. When she contacts Adam for information, he assures her of his efforts, but explains that the details are confidential, deepening the mystery and concern for Ethan's fate. The tension escalates as Ethan continues to unravel the mysteries of the town. He meets Beverly at their agreed location in Pine Forest, where she reveals that a tracking device has been implanted in him. Together, they remove the device in a secluded stone house. Beverly also shares the harrowing truth that Sheriff Arnold publicly executed Evans as a warning to the town. Ethan later meets Kate again, and despite his reservations, accepts an invitation to dinner at her house with Beverly. Anticipating surveillance, he cleverly leaves the tracking chip on his hotel bed and sets out to find a package hidden in the pine forest, as indicated by a map inside Evans's belongings. After successfully retrieving the package, Ethan observes Arnold firing a gunshot from a distance at Kate's house. While Beverly nervously remains at the dining table, Ethan searches the bathroom for surveillance devices. Beverly inadvertently mentions her daughter, a violation of the town's strict rules. Realizing her mistake, she excuses herself, leading to a tense situation as all the phones in the town ring simultaneously, signaling their exposure. Ethan and Beverly hastily leave, evading the crowd, now alerted to their actions. In the cemetery, Ethan instructs Beverly to retrieve the agent's package while he draws the crowd away. However, Beverly is captured by the townspeople. Ethan, hiding in a nearby house, witnesses a chilling scene where Beverly is dragged onto a stage before an excited crowd. Arnold incites the crowd to punish Beverly for her attempt to escape, and she is brutally executed in front of the onlookers, including Ethan. Meanwhile, Ethan's wife Teresa and their son Ben travel to Idaho to investigate Ethan's disappearance. They arrive at the Secret Service field headquarters in Boise, Idaho, where Ethan was last reported. While there, Teresa uncovers a lead to Wayward Pines. As Teresa and Ben near the town, they are pulled over by Sheriff Pope, who sabotages their car under the guise of fixing an oil leak. The following morning, Ethan stumbles upon a truck loaded with supplies, indicating a connection to the outside world. He hides in the truck's cargo hold, eventually emerging in a well-lit warehouse filled with workers and abandoned vehicles, including one that belongs to his wife, Teresa. Inside Teresa's car, he discovers personal items belonging to her and Ben, adding to his desperation and confusion about his family's whereabouts and safety. The plot takes a dramatic turn as Ethan's situation grows increasingly mysterious. As Ethan explores the warehouse, Sheriff Arnold suddenly appears, attacking him with a sedative. Ethan loses consciousness and later wakes up in a hospital bed. The nurse there informs him that his wife Teresa and son Ben have been brought to Wayward Pines and are now living in Beverly's former house. Despite his disbelief, Ethan goes to visit his family, feeling a mix of relief and apprehension about their safety in the town. He cautions Teresa Teresa against wandering or communicating with anyone, even over the phone. Aware of the town's oppressive surveillance, Ethan then confronts Arnold and Nurse Pam at the police station, demanding to know why his family was brought to Wayward Pines. Arnold insists it's for their happiness, but Ethan, unconvinced and furious, presses for more answers. Their heated exchange is interrupted by a mysterious phone call, hinting that Arnold is merely a pawn in a larger scheme controlled by an unknown mastermind. Outside the police station, Ethan encounters Dr. Jenkins, who advises him to abandon any thoughts of escape. Ethan, however, firmly states he doesn't belong in Wayward Pines. Seeking more insight, Ethan meets with Kate in the pine forest, away from the prying eyes of surveillance cameras. However, Ben follows his father and witnesses the meeting, prompting him to rush home and inform Teresa. Kate explains to Ethan that after spending 12 years in Wayward Pines, she has resigned herself to the town's rules as the only means of survival. Upon returning home, Ethan is shocked to find his family missing, with only Teresa's wedding ring left behind. Frantically searching for them, he discovers them near the isolation wall, where Arnold is threatening them with a gun. In a tense confrontation, Ethan struggles with Arnold, and Ben intervenes by hitting Arnold with a car. As Arnold lays dying, he cryptically warns Ethan that the truth is far worse than he can imagine. Ethan, taking the key to the isolation wall, opens the gate, only for a strange figure to snatch Arnold's body, accompanied by a creepy noise. Ethan quickly closes the gate and escapes with his family. Back at home, the family is deeply shaken. Ethan advises them to pretend to lead a normal life while they plan their escape. The next day, a mailman delivers a letter to Ben, welcoming him to Wayward Pine Academy, along with a uniform. Ethan, in need of a gun, visits the police station only to encounter the mayor, Brad, who warns him to follow the town's rules and avoid asking questions. Ethan is also congratulated on becoming the new sheriff, complete with a cake and a newspaper announcing Arnold's retirement. Reluctantly, Ethan plays along. Meanwhile, Ben attends Wayward Pine Academy, where he meets his teacher Megan, who is also the mayor's wife and a therapist specializing in molding the children's minds. Ethan, continuing his investigation, discovers hidden files on the town's residents, nudging him to delve deeper into the secrets of Wayward Pines. Soon after, the tension within the town continues to escalate. The residents capture a man named McCall, who is accused of spreading harmful ideas on walls. Nurse Pam pushes for a public execution the following night, but Ethan, now acting as the sheriff, strongly opposes it. In his office, Ethan interrogates McCall, but is interrupted by a phone call, leading him to reluctantly agree to execute McCall the next night. That evening, Ethan's son Ben sneaks out with his school friend Amy, indicating the younger generation's growing curiosity and defiance. Meanwhile, Ethan and Teresa have dinner at a local restaurant with the mayor and his wife Megan, where other town residents, including Pam, Kate, and her husband, are also dining. A celebration for the new sheriff follows, during which Pam takes the opportunity to congratulate Ethan, but also stresses the importance of upholding the town's strict rules. Ethan, feeling the weight of his new role, publicly declares his commitment to rooting out true evil in Wayward Pines. After the dinner, Ethan asks Teresa to return home, while he attempts to secretly help McCall escape from the cell. However, McCall suggests they head towards the isolation wall instead. At a cliff near the wall, McCall reflects on its purpose, whether it's meant to keep the residents in, or something from the outside out. In a moment of desperation, McCall embraces Ethan and then runs into the electrified wall, sacrificing himself in a bid for freedom. Teresa, meanwhile, receives a letter stating she can now work at the Wayward Pines Realty Associates, McCall's previous workplace. Ethan, determined to leave Wayward Pines, packs weapons and successfully climbs the cliff. However, he soon realizes he's being watched by a strange figure. As night falls, a dark shadow attacks him, injuring his arm. Despite firing his gun, Ethan is unable to fend off the swift creature. The next morning, Ethan prepares to navigate the pine forest, hoping to find help from the nearest city. In the town, Ben finds his new school unsettlingly perfect. While Teresa starts her new job at the realty office, she's assigned to assist a new resident, Wayne, who appears confused and disoriented. Sensing a shared experience, Teresa offers her help and discreetly inquires about his past. However, their conversation is interrupted by Pam. Later, Teresa takes Wayne to a house under the guise of giving a tour. Using the noise of a dryer as cover, she warns him about the surveillance in Wayward Pines. She learns from Wayne that he remembers waking up in a chamber, surrounded by others in a similar situation. Meanwhile, Ben and two new students are called to a closed, all-white room for orientation. Megan, the teacher and mayor's wife, begins the session, hinting that they are about to learn the hidden truths of Wayward Pines. Teacher Megan reveals a disturbing image of a hairless, monstrous humanoid creature evolved from humans in a dominant predator known as Abby, short for an aberrant. She explains that these creatures, Abbies, travel in herds, with the lunch break offering the students a brief respite to process this revelation. The session resumes. Each student receives an ancient coin dated 2095, leading teacher Morgan to reveal a startling fact. The current year is not 2014, as they believed, but 4028. She explains that their supposed accidents were actually deliberate selections to bring them to Wayward Pines. The residents, including the students, have been in hibernation chambers for over 2 millennia, chosen by the program's creator, David, who Megan says is always watching over them, though they will never meet him. Ethan, feeling a constant sense of surveillance, ventures into the woods. He cleverly uses an animal carcass to mask his scent and observes the Abbies. His journey through the pine forest leads him to the ruins of human civilization, confirming teacher Megan's revelations. Unexpectedly, he encounters a helicopter and meets Dr. Jenkins, who reveals himself as David, the architect of Wayward Pines. David urges Ethan to return to town promptly. My friends, the continuation of the story is now on the screen in front of you. In the future, an unknown organization locks millions of people in bunkers where they are forced to become bloggers and conduct endless streams to get everything they need to survive. Why us? Who were we before all this? A young man wakes up in the middle of a gloomy room, not understanding where he is and how he got there. At first, he examines the walls, hoping to find a way out, but there is none. Then the guy notices a turned-on monitor on which one word is written: share. He tries to enter different concepts related to the word exit, but the computer deems them incorrect and again offers to share. The guy confirms this command and the broadcast immediately turns on. The guy tries to ask questions, as he can't stay here long. He has a dog at home that needs to be fed and walked, and besides, he wants to drink, but there's no water. He tries to ask this question to the computer, and then an option buy appears, but the prisoner has no money and doesn't understand how he can buy water. Soon the guy realizes that real people are watching his broadcasts, but so far, he does not quite understand what he can show the viewers, so he starts to grimace, but falls and groans in pain, asking for help. The number of views sharply increases, and viewers start sending donations of unknown currency, with which any purchase can be made, but so far, he only has enough for a bowl of dog food, which appears in an opening niche on the wall. He expresses his indignation and tries to return the bowl, but there is no such function. And then the guy starts eating, occasionally making dog barks. This brings a new wave of views and donations, and the guy allows himself to buy clothes. However, they turn out to be women's. At night, he cries in despair and misunderstanding of the situation, but pulling himself together, he starts a new broadcast, during which he dances, tumbles, and entertains the viewers in every way possible. Soon, he acquires a t-shirt and an inflatable mattress. After some time, he already has a full wardrobe and shaving tools. Days go by, and the man allows himself a good meal and even alcohol, after which he tries to smash the monitor, but all he achieves is that the broadcasts stop. The guy tries in every possible way to beg forgiveness from the computer, and not getting an answer, again demands to be released from there. And then he just cries, begging for one more chance, and when the degree of despair reaches its limit, the guy lies down on the floor to wait for the end. The monitor turns on. On the screen appears the same room in which a man is. He greets the guy and explains that there are glitches in the system, but in general, upon reaching a certain level, he gained access to the common network. And now he can communicate with others like him. bloggers. The man believes that they all work for the unknown kidnappers who locked them in the bunker. The man talks to the guy all evening about the structure of his new world. He is very verbose and often jumps to other topics, so the guy even gets tired of him. But one day he hears the man cough. He tries to contact him and dialing his channel number, he comes across a cook teaching the audience to cook. The guy starts dialing different numbers, and it turns out that behind each number is someone's channel. The trapped people teach viewers how to feed cats, apply makeup, and take care of themselves. One of these girls, an athlete, captivates the guy's attention for a long time. Eventually, he connects with a man who is broadcasting about near-death experiences that day. Meanwhile, the young man continues his acrobatic etudes, for which he receives small donations. After one such unsuccessful somersault, he lies on his mattress, and the adult man asks him to buy food, as his time is worth money. After the young man fulfills his request, the man draws attention to their numbers. The young man is under number 14, while the man is 6395873. Does the young man really think he appeared here before him? Everyone in the network is trying to figure out who locked them up here. There are theories about aliens and space, and one boy convinced everyone that they are asleep and undergoing a test. But the man believes that bloggers have locked themselves in their own world. He himself was once married to a star who the young man also liked. They reminisce about her songs and sing them as a duet. At night, the young man again connects to the channel of the girl who does yoga, and after admiring her, sends her a donation. In the morning, the young man buys furniture for himself and again talks to the man, who continues to enlighten him. You can't stay at one level here, because then the viewers will stop loving you and won't pay. So, you need to grow and spread your content. The young man begins to try himself in new genres. He tests stand-up comedy, physical exercises, cooking, singing, and magic tricks. And all this brings a new audience and more donations. At night, he now does gymnastics with the girl he likes, and then he buys medicine for the man. But trying to make the purchase, he makes some mistake and ends up in the room of a woman who is showering at that moment. She is outraged by such a bold intrusion and considers him a kidnapper. The young man struggles to explain that he is also a prisoner. She suggests setting rules, and the man joins their conversation. The woman asks him about the time he has spent in the bunker and hopes that someone tried to escape. The young man remembers how he hit the monitor, and this clearly did not please their owners. The woman thinks that they need to analyze these cases and find a vulnerability in the system. The young man says something about escape and is immediately deducted donations, indicating the existence of security. The woman does not understand the purpose of what is happening. If they wanted to punish them, they would just lock them somewhere and leave them to die without food and water. But they are fed and even provided with comfort. Apparently, the key question is, why them? Who were they before all this? But the young man admits that he wasn't someone important. But here, he got the opportunity to live much better. Soon he invents a small show with socks and entertains the viewers with mini performances, which pleases the man and increases donations. One day he gifts the woman a shower curtain, which angers her because she is used to being independent. In the following days, the young man begins to teach people to draw, but since he himself can't draw, the lessons are humorous, and he himself poses as a model. The viewers like this, and the young man buys furniture for his room with the donations. One day, the woman can't stand it anymore and suggests starting a revolution, calling for an uprising of everyone else. A scandal breaks out among the trio, as the man is convinced that it is here that they got the opportunity to live better than before. That night, the man becomes ill. His cough chokes him, and suddenly he has a seizure, as a result of which his face presses against the monitor because he cannot move. The young man appeals to all subscribers for help. Maybe someone knows what to do in such a case. At this time, the woman tries to find a menu in the computer, but she accidentally presses some button, and suddenly the man's room starts burning, and he burns in front of his friend's eyes, unable to help himself. This causes despair and tears, and for a while, the pair do not communicate. But one night, the young man contacts her, trying to convince her that she is not to blame for what happened. He performs a show for her. Suddenly, she confesses that she wants to get drunk. They order alcohol for themselves and remember the last moment of freedom. Neither of them remembers how they ended up in the bunker. Then people dance in their cells. Later, they remember the old man, and the young man says that he still hears his voice. Suddenly, he admits that she was right, and maybe there are others who can replicate her action. Find a function visible only to them. If they all act together, maybe they can break free. The young man goes live and tells the audience about what happened. He points out oddities in the system where unknown functions sometimes appear, and if they can use these functions to hack, maybe the bunker will open? Suddenly, the athlete joins the conversation, who likes her current state because she decides how to spend her day. And right now, she will take care of herself, so she says goodbye to her new friends. The young man and the woman start reviewing all the strange things that the surrounding bloggers send, and some warmly support the pair. Later, he contacts the athlete again, and she reveals his secret to success. He makes people smile, which is very valuable. Misfortune exists everywhere, but so does happiness, so it's a person's own choice. She encourages him to breathe with her when the woman joins in. She analyzed the unknown functions sent to her. Someone can control the ventilation, and someone can even move the walls. She thinks these are different rooms located at different distances. Therefore, a map of connections needs to be built to break them. Although some do not want to destroy this world, the young man asks not to rush things. Suddenly, the woman takes scissors and cuts her hair, explaining it as a distraction for the bunker creators. If they don't react to their dangerous conversation, then they can be distracted by some actions. Later, the young man starts dealing all the numbers in a row and finds a novice like he once was. And at night, he joins the athlete, who calls on everyone to be happy here and now and not try to destroy reality. A dispute starts between the women, where the athlete accuses the woman of violence against others, and she expresses the thought that the athlete is their kidnapper. The young man fears that if nothing works out, he will be left without an audience, and what will he do then? But later, he still goes live and asks to show how many people are with him now. The number of votes rises to several million, causing his delight. The athlete is outraged. The young man surpassed her in channel reputation and demands to stop all this. A real conflict starts between the women. The athlete demands that others stop influencing the system while the woman asks to increase their efforts. And suddenly, the woman's room ignites and a downpour falls on her rival's room. The young man watches as both of his friends perish and can do nothing. He cries when a door opens behind him to a bright sunny day. Not believing his eyes, he approaches the threshold, but then his monitor comes to life, and the young man begins to doubt. He returns to the screen and shouts into it that they managed to do it. There is nothing that cannot be done together. But while he rejoices, the door closes. Thinking, he starts playing his role again, while the number of votes and donations on his monitor rapidly increases. Through the characters, one can observe the stages of a person's immersion in online existence when a gadget becomes a mediator between the personality and others. It can be said that this is a story of life, with many good intentions and talents, but trivially spent on the pursuit of likes. Physics professor Jason Desson's morning begins as usual. An alarm clock rings, he checks his high school son Charlie's homework, and makes coffee for his beloved wife Daniela. The woman is in a hurry and grateful for the attention. However, she is adamantly against letting Charlie drive. Despite this, Jason trusts the boy with the car, and they nearly have an accident. The father calms his son and suggests he confess his feelings to a girl he likes. Meanwhile, Jason receives a call from his friend, Ryan, who is eager to share some good news. He has received a very prestigious scientific award and invites Jason to celebrate that evening. Later, Jason heads to the university, where he tries to explain the essence of Schrödinger's thought experiment to his students. He draws a cat locked in a box on the board. Inside the box, there's also a vial of poison, a radioactive atom, and a Geiger counter. If the atom does not decay, the cat survives. But if it does, the Geiger counter will detect radiation, the vial will break, and the cat will die. All this illustrates the Copenhagen interpretation of quantum mechanics, which posits that until the box is opened, the atom is in a state of superposition, undetermined. The lecture is interrupted by a phone call, and Jason watches as the students hurriedly leave without hearing that the cat is simultaneously alive and dead. Later, Jason enters a dark room, records the day's events in his notebook, and injects himself with dark matter. The scene shifts to the family kitchen, where Jason and Daniela are preparing dinner. Charlie teases his parents for kissing too often. Then messages from Ryan, who has been waiting at the bar for a while, arrive. Daniela insists that her husband should go meet his best friend. Jason relents and heads to the bar. Ryan is delighted by his arrival and orders Daniela's favorite drink, which the bartender notes is the last bottle. Ryan introduces his colleagues to Jason and unexpectedly offers him a position in his new consciousness research lab. There's one catch: the Center for Neuropsychology will be in San Francisco, and Jason is unsure if his family will want to move from Chicago. He promises to think about it and heads home, but on a dark street he is suddenly stopped by an armed man in a mask. Jason is ready to hand over everything valuable he has, but the robber seems interested in something else. He puts Jason in the car, calling him by name, and orders him to comply. Along the way, the robber unlocks his phone, knowing the password, and asks questions about Ryan. Soon they arrive at a deserted building where the robber orders Jason to undress. He complies, but still decides to attack the assailant. However, he receives a heavy blow to the head and immediately feels an injection in his neck. The robber tells him to put on different clothes and warns that Jason is being given a new opportunity. He should remember this thought because now he will have everything he ever dreamed of, and he's doing this for both of them. When Jason asks who the robber is, he's told it's better not to know. Jason's consciousness fades. He regains consciousness in a hospital ward. He is examined and sent to a shower stall. Eventually, Jason comes to his senses in an unfamiliar bedroom. He tries to leave, but the doors are locked. Suddenly, a woman he doesn't recognize enters, behaves as if she knows him well, and introduces herself as Amanda. She informs him that his body is clean and he is no longer in quarantine. Jason doesn't understand what is happening, but no one answers his questions. The second person Jason sees is Leighton, with whom he once worked a long time ago. Leighton congratulates him on his triumph and calls him the chief scientific officer. Then, the blinds open and numerous colleagues applaud Jason, welcoming back the only one who returned. He has been absent for 14 months and 10 days, and they all want to hear about his journey. Confused, Jason begins to talk about the meeting at the bar and the strange robber, but his patience runs out because he doesn't know the people around him and doesn't understand what's happening here. Leighton announces that he must stay here overnight. However, Jason pushes him away and starts to run. He manages to reach the exit, where a security guard calls him by name and helps open the door. Jason flees the premises despite being pursued. He manages to catch a taxi, gives his address, and heads home. But upon entering, he finds his home changed beyond recognition. At the same time, in another reality, the new Jason returns from the bar and sees his upset wife Daniela. He embraces her, tells her about Ryan's offer, and reminds her of his long-ago choice to marry her, not a cold, sterile laboratory. The wife thaws and kisses her husband, unaware that this man is actually not her Jason. In another world, the first Jason meets Amanda in his home instead of his wife and son, who says they live there together. Jason does not believe this and begins to look for traces of his son, but Charlie's room looks completely different. Now it is Jason's own office, filled with awards for outstanding achievements and discoveries he has received over the years. He tries to call his wife Daniela, but the number is unavailable. Jason roams around the house trying to understand what is really happening. Meanwhile, Amanda makes a phone call, asking to handle the matter herself, but Jason sees a car with security arriving at the house and flees. In another reality, Daniela leads her husband into the bedroom and notices a wound on his arm. However, he assures her that she would not believe the truth and kisses her. Meanwhile, Jason 1 rushes to the bar he was at the night before, but the bartender refuses to recognize him, although the man calls him by name and reminds him of his favorite drink. Jason insists, but the bartender kicks him out, advising him to check his head. Then Jason goes to the hospital, where he undergoes a brain tomogram and is given sedatives. He constantly remembers Daniela and tries to find his wedding ring. At the same time, Jason 2 wakes up next to Daniela, kisses his wife, and surveys the kitchen, trying to find coffee. Simultaneously, the first Jason comes to and sees a doctor in front of him who tells him about the results of his tests. The fact is that an unknown psychoactive substance has been found in his blood, but according to all other indicators, he is completely healthy. At his request, they tried to find his family, but there is no one in Chicago with such names. The doctors also checked his file. The woman lists his achievements in science, which Jason himself does not remember, and she informs him that he had been missing for more than a year and they would like to know where he was. Jason 1 himself checks his information and still finds Daniela, but under her maiden name. In this world, she continues to pursue painting, and her exhibition is supposed to open just today. At this time, Amanda, Layton, and a security officer discuss the situation. The woman suggests calling the police. However, Layton opposes the idea and the security officer suggests checking the hospital. Meanwhile, at the hospital, Jason steals a white coat and walks out into the hall where he sees the familiar security officer. He manages to avoid the encounter and leave the hospital. Jason 2 arrives at the university and, apologizing for his tardiness, continues the lecture. Jason 1 arrives at the exhibition hall. Hearing his name, the man is freely admitted inside, where he examines a modern installation. Later, he sees his own portrait among the displayed paintings and finds Daniela. He embraces her and tries to ask about Charlie, but the woman doesn't know who that is. Moreover, she is constantly being congratulated, and she introduces Jason as the inspiration for her success. Ryan arrives, very surprised by Jason's appearance, as there had been many varied rumors about his disappearance. The man is upset with Jason because he did a lot for him and Velocity. Hearing the company's name, from which he recently escaped, Jason begins to ask questions. But then Daniela starts a speech, which includes questions about unfulfilled dreams. Everyone was asking what he could have been, and advises remembering the other doors he could have entered. At the same time, in another world, Jason 2 listens to Daniela's stories about her work plans and gives advice to his son, which surprises his wife. Simultaneously, Jason 1, Ryan, and Daniela from the New World discuss plans. Jason suddenly proposes a hypothesis about a scientist, married to the woman of his dreams, who once went to a bar where he met an old friend who had received a prestigious award. But on the way back, he was attacked, and when he woke up, everything around him had changed. A brain check revealed no abnormalities, only an unknown substance was found in his body. For a practical joke, it was too elaborate, and he had not gone mad. Jason asks to explain how he inspired Daniela's creativity, and she reminds him that once he came to her and said that theoretically people exist in millions of parallel realities, and his decision to part with her was his biggest mistake in this world. Then he talked about some secret project and warned that they would not see each other again. Then Jason starts to describe their life together with their son, causing Ryan's anger and Daniela's tears. He describes his friend's achievements in his own world, but he leaves. At the same time, Jason 2 mixes up toothbrushes, causing his wife's confusion. And Jason 1 receives permission to spend the night in Daniela's guest room, and looking around he finds an elastic band, which he wraps around his ring finger, mimicking a wedding ring. Meanwhile, Jason 2 perplexes his wife with unusual tenderness and examines the photographs on the walls of the house, after which he calls Ryan and declines his offer to work in San Francisco. At this time, Jason 1 calls Amanda and tells her that he is going to the psychiatric hospital. The woman heads there, but it turns out to be a ruse that Jason used to lure her out of the house, and now he and Daniela are inspecting his home together. The man points to a photo, but in his world they are depicted as a family in it. He talks about a son who is as talented as his mother, and Daniela admits that after he left her, she got rid of the child. Jason doesn't believe this, as everything was different, but Daniela insists that in her world, that's exactly what happened. People cannot understand why their memories differ so much, but the woman starts to believe his stories. Later, he finds records of his double from this world and realizes that he made a great discovery in quantum physics. Jason number 2 created a more voluminous version of the container where a person was put into superposition and gained the ability to move between multiple realities. It turns out that his double, Jason number 2, moved to his world and sent Jason number 1 to his dimension, to this world. So Jason is one person, living in reality until the question of marrying Daniela came up. When the first Jason chose his family, the second left Daniela. Their universes split, and the second Jason gave himself to science and invented the container. They switched worlds, but why? Later, Daniela admits that she is glad he appeared, and he explains the rubber band on his hand as a desire to preserve the marriage and return to his wife. He talks about their life there, in another reality, and admits that they were happy. Daniela kisses him, but at that moment, someone knocks at the door. They go to open it, and a security officer from the company Velocity, from which Jason had escaped, bursts into the house. He asks not to use weapons, but the woman shoots Daniela, and the last thing Jason sees is her blood-covered face. This is the first 2 episodes of a new series from Apple TV titled Dark Matter. At night, Leighton informs Amanda about what happened, and she rushes to the center where Jason has been taken. Leighton, in the meantime, apologizes to the tied-up Jason. He couldn't imagine his friend was so unstable and cannot release him yet. Jason, shocked by Daniela's murder, does not want to talk about his supposed genius invention. Jason, too, invites Daniela 1 to a cafe. She is surprised by her husband's behavior, but likes this new Jason. Moreover, they have a dinner planned for close friends the next day, something their family hasn't done in a long time. In a parallel reality, a detective visits Leighton, surprised by yet another disappearance of an employee from their lab. Before this, Blair and a couple of junior employees also vanished. Leighton pretends to know nothing. The detective goes to Amanda. Later, Amanda expresses her displeasure. She is very upset with Don's behavior, while the boss reminds her of the millions spent. If everything comes out, the project will be shut down. They don't understand what happened to Jason, who decides to play along with the colleagues and asks for help in remembering everything. Leighton takes him to a hangar where a huge metal box stands. Jason recalls trying to create a small Schrodinger's box once, but Leighton convinces him that he managed to make a huge box that can easily fit several people. Only Jason knows how it works. The man steps inside, but there are no panels or screens. Recording devices don't work either. Jason is told about the missing people and then shown footage of him emerging from the box. Jason, too, takes Charlie to a store, buys him an expensive skateboard, surprising his son with generosity, and then questions him about the family friends coming to dinner tomorrow. In a parallel reality, Amanda tells Jason 1 that she works as a psychiatrist in the lab, and they have been living together for over a year. Before he disappeared, he met with his ex-girlfriend and then just vanished. Jason suddenly suggests he might not be who she thinks he is. Amanda leaves completely puzzled. Meanwhile, in the parallel reality, Jason too welcomes the guests. He keeps conversations going, displaying knowledge of everyone's lives gleaned from social networks, and talks with his son. Jason 1 tries to answer Leighton's questions, who begins to suspect him of being an imposter. The man is beaten, forced to reveal the whereabouts of their Jason, but he knows nothing and cannot explain how the container works. Leighton asks him to strain his memory, as there might be a way to reach a world where cancer is cured. However, all is in vain. Daniela thanks her husband for the wonderful evening. She hasn't seen him like this in a long time, and he seems completely changed. At the same time, in the parallel world, Ryan is thrown into Jason's room, horrified to learn of Daniela's death, as he was the one who told Leighton that Jason went to her. Ryan had created a drug for Jason that changes the chemical composition of the brain's cortex, temporarily putting some parts to sleep. Jason admits he is not the Jason Ryan knew in this world. The drug creates a special effect that, combined with the container, allows for traveling between worlds. Leighton's men take Ryan away. Meanwhile, in the parallel world, Jason too tells his wife he nearly died under the wheels, prompting him to reassess his life and express his gratitude for her presence. In the neighboring world, Amanda enters Jason's room, ordering him to follow her as she intends to get him out of there. They walk through the corridors but encounter a guard who raises the alarm. Jason and Amanda run to the container. They are chased, but Jason closes the iron door, cutting off Don's fingers. Amanda injects both herself and Jason with the drug that aids in transferring. Jason too, in the meantime, reviews family archives and finds a birth certificate of another son, Max. In an alternate world, Jason 1 and Amanda find themselves in a dark corridor with many doors. Leighton, angered by their disappearance, enters the container himself. Jason and Amanda proceed through the corridor, but all doors look the same. The man suggests the doors lead to other worlds. They step out into one and find themselves on the street of a dead city. There is ash and smoke everywhere. They look around and notice a house in front of them starting to crumble. They rush back to the container, barely making it. Coughing, Amanda shows a case with the remaining doses of the drug, 48 in total. According to the coordinates, the container stands in the same place as in her world, meaning only the external world changes. They inject themselves again and head to the next reality. Leighton also enters the corridor, searching for the pair, but without success so far. Jason too attends a lecture in place of his double, but realizing the students are uninterested, he leaves the auditorium, announcing his resignation. Jason 1 and Amanda step into another world and find themselves in a forest. They continue and enter a reality without an atmosphere after a nuclear explosion. The woman's nerves give way, but Jason explains it's a multiverse where everything that could happen did happen. They will soon need food and water, so they must find a habitable world. He opens another door, and the pair end up in the Velocity facility, witnessing Leighton and Don killing their doubles. Jason manages to push Amanda into the container and close the doors. Later, they open the next doors but find dead worlds everywhere. Exhausted, Amanda rushes through the first door she sees with Jason hurrying after her. They find themselves in the midst of a snowstorm. The woman loses consciousness from the cold. Jason searches for a bunker but sees a house nearby. He breaks a window, carries Amanda inside, wraps her in a blanket, and lights a fire in the fireplace. Meanwhile, Jason too visits Leighton in his world. Here too, he is rich but spends his time idly. Jason offers him to become his investor in a very unusual venture. In the snowy world, Jason 1 steps outside and sees a completely frozen city. Jason 2 takes Leighton 2 to a bunker and offers him the substance. Jason 1 returns to the house, finds a family photograph of the owners, and remembers his own family. His wife pulls out a photo of their second son, who is no longer there. Amanda, warming up, learns that the container is buried in snow and finding it is impossible. She recalls being stuck in a snowstorm. Jason suddenly realizes this might have triggered their arrival in the frozen world. Perhaps they can choose where to move. Jason too shows Leighton to the container and promises to show him the path not taken. Instantly, the corridor with doors appears before them. Amanda and Jason, armed with probes, begin searching for the container in the snowdrifts. Suddenly, Amanda realizes that the compass always points in the same direction, indicating the container's approximate location. They head that way and soon find the box. In the neighboring universe, Daniela and Charlie walk to the memorial tree. Simultaneously, Jason starts telling Amanda about his second son. Daniela recounts the same story to Charlie. Once, Jason and Daniela were thrilled to learn they were expecting twins, but Max had a weak heart and died. They planted a tree, mixing their son's ashes with the soil. Every birthday, they sit under it and remember the boy. Leighton, too, meanwhile, is delighted by what he sees. Jason tells him about his life in the world where Leighton was his research partner. The tycoon agrees to fund his work. Jason 1 narrates his abduction to Amanda. He doesn't understand why his double went to such lengths. After questioning him about his life, Amanda suggests that the double simply wanted to fix Jason 1's life, making him happy while also taking what he himself lacked, a family. Daniela and Charlie discuss their father's strange behavior, but then Jason 2 arrives, congratulates his son on his birthday, and gives him car keys. To his stunned wife, he confesses he quit his job but assures her not to worry about money as he has returned to science and already found a sponsor. She can pursue her passion for painting. Jason 1 and Amanda experiment in front of the next door. Jason tries to set a mood, outlining the conditions for the next world. Everything should be peaceful and beautiful, but opening the door, the pair end up in water. The city is flooded. With great difficulty, they close the container door. Amanda asks him to analyze his feelings, and Jason thinks he understands the mistake, but the woman is convinced that lying won't work here. Later, they rest, reminiscing about their loved ones. Amanda admits she loves special candies, but they don't exist in Jason's world. The woman reveals that the first to test the container was Engineer Blair, followed by 2 volunteers. Soon, the drug's effect wears off. Amanda opens the door and the pair find themselves in the Velocity basement. Initially, they want to escape, but hunger takes over. They look around, but the cafeteria is closed and the elevator doesn't work. Amanda recalls a protocol designed for such a situation. They find a bedroom with someone lying under a blanket, but it's a shriveled body. It becomes clear that something terrible happened in this world. As they prepare to return to the container, a person with a gun stops them, but upon closer inspection, Amanda recognizes Blair. After joyful embraces, Jason tells Blair everything that happened. In his world, he knows her as his wife's friend, but there, she works as a lawyer. Blair leads them to a habitable area and offers them food. She arrived here 3 months ago when nothing worked. She managed to start the generators and access the system, discovering that Earth was overrun by creatures that devoured all living things. She went outside for food and saw the dead world. Blair also has drug vials but is not yet ready to leave. Jason 2 and Leighton continue to explore the bunker. They compare their worlds, finding similarities and differences. Jason 2 explains that money varies between worlds, and carrying it is dangerous. One must be careful and honest. Blair reminds Amanda that Jason belongs to another world, so she must decide where she wants to be without considering him. Blair refuses to join them, not ready to re-enter the container. Leighton, having visited the first world, is thrilled. Jason is ready to let him go, believing he has prepared him. Blair gives the pair her diary describing the world she saw. Unfortunately, she has few vials left. Jason and Amanda leave. In the corridor, Amanda suddenly cries. Jason too ruined lives, knowing how to use the container. Jason 1 consoles her. Emboldened, Leighton promises Jason 2 $1 million for the next doses of the drug. Jason 1 decides to write in Blair's diary what he wants to see behind the next door. He thinks the method worked and they finally arrived in his world. But stepping outside, they notice unusual emptiness. They manage to open a car and drive to his house. The door is opened by a haggard Daniela. She says Jason was taken to the hospital and the deceased, Charlie, lies in his room. The man runs outside, encountering a medical patrol. A female doctor goes inside, while another doctor performs a rapid test on Jason. The returning doctor says hospitals are full, and Daniela is better off dying at home. The end is near. The virus spreads through body fluids, so Jason should avoid touching Daniela. She gives him several morphine injections, advising him to ease his wife's passing. Amanda tries to keep him from entering the house, reminding him that this is not his world and not his wife. But Jason returns. They reminisce about good moments that turn out to be very similar in both worlds. Then the woman takes the syringe. Jason and Amanda return to the container. The woman reminds him that they were talking about Jason's mother's illness. That's why they ended up in a world dying from a pandemic. The pair continues on. They arrive in a world that, at first glance, doesn't differ from Jason's. Meanwhile, Jason too apologizes to his wife for the unilateral decision to buy their son a car. The woman points out that such things are becoming more frequent. Her husband seems to be distancing from her, even missing the gathering at the tree. He tells her about Leighton, who will pay huge sums for his discoveries. Jason enters his house, but upon hearing voices upstairs, he grabs a knife from the kitchen. Daniela screams in fear upon seeing him, and Charlie rushes into the room. They both act as if they are mortally afraid of Jason. The woman grabs the phone and tells emergency services that her arrested husband has come to her with a knife. Charlie shouts at him to leave. Frightened, Jason exits the house as a siren sounds in the distance. Amanda takes him to her friend, but the friend is horrified. In this world, Amanda is dead, and the friend mourns her deeply. Amanda tells her that she is in a better world and then takes the car keys. They drive to the container. In Jason 2's world, the container opens, and he steps out, retrieving backpacks with drugs. A lab assistant who rushes out tells him about his double's appearance and his escape with Amanda. Jason 2 returns to the corridor, where he hands doses to Leighton. He then informs him that he will have to seal this world. Daniela from Jason's original world starts painting, and her husband's double is thrilled, suggesting she leave the gallery and focus solely on painting, especially since the deal with Leighton is sealed. Later, he picks up their son and treats him to ice cream with nuts, not knowing the boy is allergic to them. Daniela can't understand how he could forget such a thing. Then she notices injection marks on his arms. In the evening, he uses dental floss, something he has never done, and Daniela becomes increasingly puzzled. Jason 1 and Amanda continue searching for his world, but they keep finding discrepancies. A different door color, a dog's presence, the absence of the memory tree, and similar things. Amanda suggests they rest at a hotel and have dinner at a normal cafe. Over the meal, they laugh a lot and then dance. At night, Jason hugs Amanda but stops, realizing they are not together. Jason too visits a psychotherapist who turns out to be Amanda's double. He talks about his relationship with Daniela and the disappointments he has faced. She suddenly reminds him that expectations can be overly high. Daniela complains to her friend Blair about his strange changes, and Blair advises her to keep an eye on her husband. In the evening, Jason asks his wife to wear a new dress and takes her to the gallery where he has hung her painting. Instead of gratitude, Daniela is horrified and asks to be taken home. She is very angry about his unilateral action, which she feels has humiliated her. Jason admits he never really knew her and is trying to make her happy against her wishes. Leaving his wife at home, he drives away, unaware that she is following him. Soon, they arrive at a warehouse where Daniela sees a locker her husband uses. Waiting for him to leave, she takes out a couple of vials lying on the floor. Later, she gives one to Ryan, asking him to analyze the drug. Meanwhile, Jason 1 finds the Daniela of this world. She also runs a gallery but doesn't recognize him during their conversation. Amanda also finds her double, but here the woman is married and has a son. At night, Jason goes to his house and watches his wife embrace his copy. Amanda, in the meantime, describes her ideal world. When Jason returns, a quarrel ensues because Amanda loses faith that they will find his world, as they only have 10 vials left. Ryan accuses Jason too of stealing his research, as the drug in his vial is identical to his own. Jason too takes his friend to the container. He injects the drug into himself and Ryan ends up in the corridor with doors to other worlds. Realizing he is in a quantum state, he is thrilled. Jason explains how to tune into another reality, and upon opening a door, Ryan sees a fantastically beautiful Chicago. This world is kinder and more progressive because Jason made it so for his friend. He asks for Ryan's phone to take a picture of him and steps back to the door. Ryan realizes this is not his friend. Jason just closes the door, leaving the man in another world. Later, he sees that Daniela is calling Ryan. Then Layton's men arrive and pack up the container. Sometime later, a detective comes to Jason's house, investigating Ryan's disappearance. The couple tells her about their last encounters with the friend, and Jason too suddenly states that Ryan drank a lot, although he never drank alcohol. After this, Daniela shows him the remaining vial and confesses she has been following him. He explains that Ryan made the drug for Jason 2's research because he is reviving his project. Amanda leads Jason 1 into a world she has imagined. This Chicago is beautiful. They walk through a clean and cozy city, enjoying friendly faces. They drink cocoa from edible cups and then have a snack in a cafe where they learn about a trendy restaurant in the tallest tower in the city. Amanda leaves, setting up a meeting with Jason there. A nearby couple gives him a photo they took, admiring them. Later, Jason goes to the restaurant and sees Amanda in an evening dress. She gives him a suit she bought for him, and he changes and joins her. Jason gives her her favorite candies, which exist in this world. She laughs, saying he is an insurance agent here. Her double in this world disappeared 2 years ago. Taking advantage of their identical appearance, Amanda made a passport and gained access to the double's savings, so she decided to stay here. She invites Jason to join her, but he declines. Before leaving, Jason secretly places 2 of the remaining vials in her purse. Amanda cries in the elevator, but, seeing the sun, wipes her tears and heads into a new life. Jason goes to the container. He has only 3 vials left, and the next world is destroyed. He continues, and in the next reality, he calls his wife. She is surprised, as she just saw him off to work, but Jason confesses his love to her. At night, he sneaks into his house and sees Daniela hugging his copy, but going down to the kitchen, he encounters his son, and it is not Charlie. It turns out that here they managed to save Max by transplanting the heart of a deceased girl, and now he suffers from guilt. Jason 1 comforts him. Meanwhile, Jason 2 confesses to the psychotherapist Amanda that he wants to pack up and leave his wife. Then suddenly he tells very personal things about the doctor herself. She kicks him out, but outside, Jason 2 is met by a detective. They tracked Ryan's phone and know that after the bar, he went to the industrial part of the city, so she intends to check all the cameras located there. Jason 2 goes to the container and breaks the formwork. He finds Ryan's double in the first world, where he works as a simple mechanic, gets him drunk, brings him to his world, cleans him up, and puts him to sleep in Ryan's bed. Jason 1 takes out the last vial and writes in Blair's diary his memories of the first meeting with Daniela. He saw the living Max and even thought of treating his double in that world as he had been treated. But he realized he only wants his family, his home, and his life. Jason 1 opens the door and finally arrives in his world. He heads home, checking all the details along the way, but upon approaching the house, he sees himself telling Daniela that he found Ryan in a wild drunken state. He had to clean his friend up and take him home. Jason 1 goes to a store to buy a gun, but without a permit, he buys pepper spray and a hunting knife. A minute later, Jason 2 enters the same store and repeats his double's actions. The stunned shop assistant remarks that they were just discussing buying a gun. She asks if he has a twin brother. Realizing his prototype has returned, Jason 2 runs outside but finds no one. Friends, if you've watched this far, pay closer attention because the most confusing part of the plot is about to begin. He returns home where Charlie informs him that Mom went to Ryan, who is behaving very strangely. Jason 2 goes outside and is attacked by another Jason in a hat, whom he kills in a fight. Meanwhile, Ryan, seeing Daniela, claims that he is an auto mechanic and repairs her car in his world, not a scientist-chemist. He recalls a man offering him alcohol and recognizes Jason from a photo. Jason checks his gear and stepping into the hallway encounters himself, but the double runs away, and Jason gives chase. At this time, Jason 2 loads the body of the killed double into a car, and Jason 1 catches up with his double in a bar. They realize that their copies multiply in a container, and it's unclear how many there could be, but they all aimed for this particular Chicago, as their prototype was desperate to get home. Amanda appeared in all realities. Only in one did she die in a terrible world. and for Jason 1, she remained in the best world. Both are out of vials and cannot help each other. Jason 3 suggests getting rid of the one who caused all this. Jason 2 doesn't know about the place where they both love to rest. They need to lure the villain there and kill him. Besides, Jason 3 has already dug a grave there, and he also has a gun. The next morning, Jason 1 goes to the bar, where he lights a cigar despite the strict prohibition. He is taken to the police station. Meanwhile, Daniela plans to take her husband's large car to move some things to the gallery, but he rudely forbids her, and Jason 2 drives his son to the university, showing him memorable places on the campus when he notices Jason 3 watching them. Daniela goes to the storage box again and, breaking the doors, finds bags with unknown currency, a box of vials, and Ryan's jacket. But then she gets a call from the police. Jason 2 guides Charlie through the building, and their pursuer loses sight of them. The father asks his son to take the car and meet him at another exit, even though he doesn't have a license yet. Confused, Charlie leaves, and Jason 2 tries to throw Jason 3 off his trail, but he also knows the university building well. Eventually, the men engage in a fight, and the second Jason wins. Charlie makes a failed maneuver, attracting a policeman's attention, and Jason 2 knocks out the third and locks him in a toilet stall. Meanwhile, the policeman demands Charlie's license, but at that moment, Jason 2 appears, managing to persuade the officer to let them go. At this moment, Daniela sees her husband at the station. It turns out Jason was looking for a place where they could talk safely. He tells his wife the truth, but she doesn't believe him. Then Jason suggests calling him. Daniela dials her husband's number, and Jason answers. She hangs up, then Jason asks her to call again and remind him of their great vacation in Miami, though they never actually went there. Daniela does this, adding made-up details about the vacation, and that Jason agrees, pretending to remember the trip. Now Daniela believes her real husband, who says there are other versions of him. They agree on a code word in a meeting place, and Daniela goes to get their son. But at home she finds her husband, Jason 2, who orders her to pack because they need to leave urgently. The mother tries to talk to her son, but Jason 2 is on guard and doesn't let them do it. The woman leaves supposedly to get a suitcase and messages Charlie. The boy leaves first, and Daniela lures her husband into the basement and pushes him down the stairs. They drive away, but another car with yet another Jason behind the wheel cuts them off. Daniela realizes this is another version of her husband. At this moment, they are rammed by a car driven by yet another Jason. Daniela and Charlie flee. Soon they reach the place where Jason 1 is waiting for them. He says the code word and hugs his son. Meanwhile, Jason's family leaves the city. Suddenly, Daniela and Charlie start receiving messages from numerous other Jasons, assuring them that only they can protect them. The woman turns off the gadgets. Her husband can't choose a place where they can hide, as the other Jasons might also guess where to look for them. Then Charlie takes over and shows the way to a friend's vacant house. Charlie is puzzled by the number of fathers, as, theoretically, they all are his father in some way. Jason suggests they sleep first and then make decisions. Daniela sympathizes with his adventures, but those other Jasons are suffering too. The woman goes to bed, while Jason checks his email and suddenly sees an entire chat of 44 Jasons arguing over who gets Daniela and Charlie. In the morning, Jason finds his wife on the beach. She admits that at first, she liked the new Jason, but gradually she realized he wasn't the one she loved. Her husband tells her he sometimes thought about a new life. Apparently Jason 2 also thought about this, so he moved to their world. He recalls Daniela number 2, who became an artist, lived in a luxurious apartment, and had lots of friends. Jason 3 also studies the chat, trying to figure out where his double went. Suddenly he gets a message from Blair asking to return the car. He realizes Daniela borrowed a car from a friend and asks her to come urgently. At this time, Jason tells his wife about the chat, and one of them suggesting to raffle her and Charlie in a lottery. Jason 2 questions the third about what happened to him in other worlds. He tells about the death of Daniela and Ryan, and the suffering of Amanda, who loved that Jason very much. In the reality of the third Jason, she died in the forest, impaled by a giant tree branch. Jason 2 begins to understand the horror of his actions, as he hoped to make his double happy with a new life. Meanwhile, Charlie prepares breakfast and tells Jason the latest news from their life, deciding where to go next. At this time, Blair arrives at their house and finds Jason 3 tied up in a closet. The third attacks her and demands to track her car, but Blair manages to neutralize him and demands to tell her the truth about the ongoing madness. Jason tells his wife and son about other realities. They are amazed that their doubles live in a few microns away, unseen by them. Jason admits that there was one world where he almost stayed but couldn't imagine life without his family. Later, Daniela reads his chat. They spend the night together, reminiscing about their first meeting. She admits she made a choice and informed the other Jasons. But later, Jason suddenly sees a shadow outside the window, and going outside, finds an injured double, who says he was hit by one of them. There are many of them here, and it won't end just like that. Gunshots are heard in the dark, and Jason asks his wife to run to their son, but then another armed double calls out to him, demanding his clothes and the code word. Jason 1 charges at him. A fight ensues, but a shot rings out, and the double falls. It turns out to be Jason 2, who realized his guilt. He asks for their forgiveness, gives them car keys, and asks them to leave. The family drives into the night while the second Jason shoots back at the other doubles, giving them a chance to escape. Here they find a suitcase with a device for traveling between worlds in the car and a phone with a recorded message, in which Jason 2 admits that he entered the container full of regret about the world where the family he didn't create lived, and now he offers to find them a new home in another world. The family heads to the container, where they are met by dozens of Jason doubles who understood that the woman made a choice and came to say goodbye. The family walks into the container through the line of Jasons. There, they trust Charlie to choose a new world where they will all be happy. Charlie opens the door and steps into another reality, followed by his parents. This concludes the first season.
Furiosa lives with her tribe in a green oasis amidst an arid desert. One day, she and her friend go out to gather fruits. Suddenly, the girl notices strangers in the forest. She sneaks up to their motorcycles and disables one of them. However, when she moves to the next bike, the girl is spotted. Furiosa blows the whistle that her tribe uses to signal danger and starts running. However, the girl is captured, tied up, and taken away. But her signal was heard. The entire tribe rushes to her rescue, and the girl's mother, Mary, arms herself, mounts a horse, and gives chase. Mary pursues the kidnappers for a long time, eventually catching up to and killing the slowest one. She then takes his motorcycle and continues the chase. Soon, another bandit's motorcycle breaks down. 2 others stop to check for pursuers. During this time, Furiosa bites through the fuel line of the motorcycle. Her captor doesn't notice this, and seeing the pursuit on the horizon, the bandits ride on. Meanwhile, Furiosa's mother finds the second bandit's motorcycle and switches to it. As evening falls, the bandits stop to check their bikes. They realize the pursuit isn't far behind. One suggests abandoning the girl, but another reminds them of their low status. Bringing the captive girl back would raise their standing in the gang. While they argue, Furiosa manages to free her legs and runs away, but the bandits notice and catch up with her. Morning comes as Mary catches up with the kidnappers. She sees them through the scope of her rifle, but shooting now is risky, as they are close to the bandit camp. Nevertheless, she shoots one. The other bandit, however, has secured Furiosa to his back, making it too risky for her to shoot. The bandit rides into the camp, sparking a dispute among the biker gang members, each wanting the girl for themselves. However, her captor claims he has seen a place of abundance, causing excitement among the crowd. The bandits decide to take the girl to their leader, Dementus. Mary follows them. On the way, Furiosa manages to push her captor off the motorcycle, preventing him from revealing the oasis's location. Dementus tries to intimidate the girl, but she remains silent. The bandit then resorts to trickery, ordering her to be washed and fed, promising to send her home the next day. Meanwhile, Mary disguises herself in the clothes of the last bandit she shot and heads to Dementus's camp. Furiosa is taken to a tent where a servant cleans her up. Seeing Mary in a helmet, the servant gets scared and begs not to be harmed, promising not to raise the alarm. Mary spares her, but as soon as mother and daughter leave, the servant runs to the warriors. A chase quickly ensues following the tracks of Mary's and Furiosa's motorcycle. Realizing they can't escape together, Mary orders her daughter to ride away. As a parting gift, she gives her a peach seed and makes Furiosa promise to plant it and protect the green lands. Furiosa rides away but stops and watches as her mother fights Dementus's hordes. Mary fights bravely, but cannot overcome all of them and is captured. The girl, crying, runs to her and manages to see Dementus's men brutally executing her mother.
Dementis promises to release both if the girl shows the way to the oasis, but Furiosa only cries in grief. Dementis takes the girl and locks her in a cage. She is forced to watch the bloody competitions Dementis loves to hold. He tries to appease the girl and even gives her his favorite teddy bear. Dementis' history specialist offers to teach her to read and write, suggesting she could become a historian, but she plans to escape back to the Greenlands, tattooing the path onto her arm. One day, Dementis and his horde, searching for the place of abundance, encounter a strange warrior who claims to have come from the Citadel, where there is everything. Dementis decides this must be the land they seek and heads in that direction. Soon they reach the impregnable fortress guarded by the army of Immortan Joe. Dementis delivers a fiery speech, trying to rally the common people to his side. However, the Citadel's leader offers to choose one of his warriors to begin the battle. Dementis' servant points to one of Immortan Joe's soldiers. The soldier takes up his weapon, says goodbye, and jumps into the midst of the biker warriors, where he detonates himself, taking many enemies with him. But Dementis cannot retreat. The battle begins. Immortan Joe's men skillfully capture Dementis' motorcycles and cars with hook chains, lifting them into the air. They do this with Furiosa's cage as well, but the history specialist manages to latch onto the cage, and Dementis himself comes to help. They free the girl from the cage and flee. Sometime later, Dementis rebuilds his horde and plans to capture one of Immortan Joe's military bases, Gastown. First, he stops a fuel tanker headed for the town and forces his people to disguise themselves as Citadel warriors. Disguised as Joe's men, they head to the town, whose guards, at the last moment, open the gates for the suspicious convoy. Dementis' men capture Gastown and now can dictate terms to Immortan Joe. Learning of this, the Citadel leader agrees to negotiations where the bikers demand tribute in the form of supplies. Dementis' people display the head of Gastown's leader, threatening to impale it with an iron spike if Immortan Joe does not meet the bikers' demands. Realizing he cannot defeat the bikers outright, Joe agrees to consider their demands, but he notices Furiosa in the crowd. Seeing his interest, Dementis claims the girl as his daughter, but for the first time in a long while, Furiosa speaks and accuses Dementis of killing her mother. Eventually, Immortan Joe allows Dementis to rule Gastown, promising to supply the bikers with some food and water in exchange for Furiosa and the biker gang's mechanic. Angered, Dementis takes the teddy bear from the girl. Furiosa is taken to a room where Immortan Joe's women rest. On this day, one of his wives gives birth, but the child is again born a mutant. While the girl watches, one of Joe's warriors, Rictus, notices the bells in her hair. Realizing she has caught his interest, Furiosa cuts off her hair and makes a wig with the bells that night. Later, Rictus takes her to his quarters, where he examines her and finds the star tattoo on her arm leading to her home. But, fascinated by the jingling hair, he starts to stroke it. The girl twists away, leaves the wig in his hands, and escapes. Sometime later, Furiosa, who managed to trick her way into a crane operator brigade, earns praise as a fearless boy who lost his voice in one of the wars. No one can even imagine she is a girl, not a tough mute boy. Only Rictus once notices her familiar eyes, but doesn't have time to understand as construction begins on a well-armed supply truck to withstand raider attacks in the lawless wasteland. Considering the situation, the girl plans to escape, hiding a motorcycle and supplies under the main truck. Sometime later, during another trip along Fury Road to the fuel farm, the truck is attacked by marauders who left Dementis' gang. The truck's guards engage in battle, which takes place while moving. The Separatists use everything, including parachutes, to capture the vehicles. Taking advantage of this, Furiosa descends under the truck to free the motorcycle from its chains. During this time, a technician descends to replace a part of the damaged hose but falls, managing to pass Furiosa a spare part. One of the attackers approaches the truck and attaches explosives to its underside. Furiosa saves the truck and, risking her life, fixes the breakdown. The Separatists don't relent, and the driver does everything to shake off the pursuers, but they are persistent, and almost all the guards are killed. Furiosa climbs onto the truck's hood, her helmet is knocked off, and the driver, Praetorian Jack, realizes she is a girl. Furiosa climbs into the cab, and together with Jack, they fend off the remaining Separatists. In the end, all the military guards are killed, leaving only Jack in the truck, Furiosa, and a mutant who, at her command, releases spiked balls, destroying the flying vehicle, but dying himself. The girl returns to the cab and tries to kill Jack, but he throws her off the truck and leaves her on the road. However, he later returns and offers to create a new convoy with her, respecting her bravery. Furiosa becomes Jack's deputy and receives the title of Praetorian. Meanwhile, Dementus, with his inability to manage, practically destroys Gastown's infrastructure, leading to worker dissatisfaction. Realizing no better opportunity will come, Jack proposes they flee, providing Furiosa with everything needed. However, they make another trip and find chaos, which Dementus unsuccessfully tries to quell. Realizing he cannot succeed, Dementus calls a council at the Citadel and orders the truck to leave, leaving supplies behind. Learning of this, Immortan Joe becomes enraged and orders Furiosa and Jack to collect weapons and ammunition in Leadtown. That evening, Jack confesses to Furiosa that he wants to help her because he still remembers his parents. The girl shows him the star map on her arm and offers to leave with her. During their last trip, Jack orders the crew to load the tanker with everything necessary and has Furiosa drive the escort vehicle. However, when the truck arrives in Leadtown, they fall into an ambush. Jack sends a signal ordering Furiosa to flee while he leads the enemy away. But driven by revenge, the girl opens fire with a sniper rifle, trying to kill Dementus. Seeing her, the biker leader fires a grenade launcher at her. Jack, thinking she is dead, destroys the tower where Dementus is hiding. Hanging on the edge, Dementus manages to see Furiosa saving Jack from the abyss where the truck fell and driving away with him on a motorcycle. The pair reach their vehicle left outside the gates and drive off. A surviving Dementus gives chase. On the way, Furiosa tells Jack the route to the place of abundance. Meanwhile, Dementus' men catch up with them. Jack tries to stop the pursuers by firing a rifle, but their vehicle is forced off the road. Furiosa and Jack are dragged out. Enraged, Dementus orders both to be killed, but Jack must die first. Furiosa is chained and forced to watch as they torment her friend. But as evening falls, Dementus sees a hand hanging from a chain with a star map. The girl has cut off her own arm and is now riding away on a stolen motorcycle. With her last strength, she reaches the Citadel, where she is taken to Joe. The girl recounts everything that happened and helps plan the war against Dementus. Through trickery, they convince Dementus that the warriors have left the Citadel for Gastown, and the horde rushes to the fortress, where most of the bikers perish. In the meantime, Furiosa, having lost her way home, shaves her head, replaces her hand with a mechanical prosthesis, and prepares for battle. She seizes a vehicle the Praetorians prepared for pursuing Dementus and sets off alone. Meanwhile, Dementus and a few loyal followers try to flee, but Furiosa catches up with him in the desert. Dementus orders his companions to scatter in different directions to throw off the pursuer, but the girl confidently follows his tracks, killing his aides one by one. After a long chase, she finally catches Dementus in the desert. He lies down before her in submission but mocks her, saying revenge will not heal her. Furiosa chains him and reminds him of her murdered mother, but he suddenly confesses that he became this way after his wife and children were killed. He reminds her that no amount of his suffering will bring back her loved ones, and he has a very high pain threshold. Furiosa beats him, but soon realizes he is right. Revenge does not alleviate the pain of loss. When Dementus loses consciousness, she takes his teddy bear, and he finally recognizes her and proposes they join forces to conquer the wasteland. But the girl throws away the toy. A voiceover narrates that Furiosa imprisoned Dementus in the Citadel, using his living body as fertilizer to grow a peach tree from her mother's seeds. Later, she receives command of a new truck, hiding 5 of Immortan Joe's wives who want to escape from him. The new Mad Max movie is filled with fury and a thirst for revenge. It has an excess of harsh and unpleasant scenes, but it also has its philosophy, soul, and hope that even in the most unbearable conditions and the harshest trials, one can remain human and stay true to their goal. Bob is an ordinary man at first glance, living in a small northern town and working at a lumber mill. His ex-family, his wife Darlene and daughter Eva, live far from him. Their relationship is strained. The girl has reached a troublesome age, behaving oddly and completely ignoring her mother. One ordinary day, Bob returns home and receives a call from Darlene, who complains about their daughter and asks him to influence her. However, Bob asks to be forgotten and ends the call abruptly. Yet, he is deeply upset by Eva's behavior, and to relieve some tension, heads to a bar where he soon notices a dealer. Later they meet on the street. The young man tells him that his boss, Nelson, is in need of couriers. He remembers Bob from his NHL days, especially a famous fight Bob would rather forget. The man cuts off the young man's enthusiasms and buys some goods, dismayed by the rising prices. At work, Bob goes to inspect one of the malfunctioning blocks of the crusher. He climbs up to the machine and stares inside as if he wants to step into the blades. His grim thoughts are interrupted by a coworker's voice, and Bob abandons the frightening idea. Later, Bob tells his boss he needs a few days off, packs his things, and goes on a trip. However, on the night road, he suddenly feels very ill. Racked with pain, he loses control, and his pickup veers off the road. Barely recovering, Bob calls Nelson and then reaches a roadside cafe where he immediately heads to the bathroom, startling patrons with his bloodied face. Overcoming pain, Bob washes the blood off his hands, which are already bandaged, and then examines his side. It becomes clear that a piece of his skin has become invisible, making his internal organs clearly visible. Bob bandages himself with towels and returns to the dining area, where Nelson soon arrives. The dealer agrees to tow and fix his pickup, in exchange for which Bob will have to serve as his courier, especially since he is heading in the needed direction. Nelson admires his hockey talent and confesses he still watches his old games. He tries to offer support, but Bob cuts off his attempts to befriend him and reluctantly agrees to become a courier. Nelson brings Bob home, then heads to a dump frequented by bears. This time, he shoots one of the animals and guts it on the spot. In the morning, Nelson delivers to Bob a container with the animal's organs, which are to be sold on the black market. The pickup is already repaired, and Bob sets off. He reaches his ex-wife's house late in the evening. Darlin lets Bob inside and informs him that Eva is staying over at a friend's. In the morning, Bob prepares to meet Nelson's contact, who runs a repair shop in town. At that moment, Eva appears. She is happy to see her father, but feels hurt when he refuses to take her with him. Bob drives to the shop, where the owner's employees greet him with a search, but the owner recognizes the former hockey player. He warns that working with Nelson is dangerous and advises thinking about the future. Nevertheless, he hands over the package for the dealer, and noticing Bob's unwell appearance, he gives him a Chinese remedy he gets from a local store. Later, Bob returns home. Ava also notices that her father is feeling unwell, but he brushes it off as Rib's injured at work. Suddenly, the girl asks about the diagnosis of her grandfather, Bob's father, who had died long ago. The man explains that his father voluntarily left this life because he had some issues with his head. After the conversation, Eva runs off to her friends, but on the way she stops by a Chinese pharmacy. The seller is very welcoming and even suggests visiting a doctor who is available right there in the next room. Even when the girl refuses to buy anything, the seller gives Eva herbal tea to improve her skin. Later, Eva meets up with her friends, who suggest going on a tour of an abandoned psychiatric hospital. Although Eva's friend doesn't want to go, Eva insists on visiting more than anyone else. They wander around the creepy rooms, scaring each other with possible ghost encounters. Eva confesses that her grandfather was once a patient there, whom she never knew as he died before she was born. She hopes to find old documents and learn his diagnosis. The group descends into the basement, where they are frightened by a figure in a white sheet, but on a closer look it turns out to be just a pile of rags. However, Eva's friend in terror grabs her hand, tugs at her sleeve, and sees a transparent hand. The girl gets even more frightened and runs away from Eva. Meanwhile, her parents recall their years together and Eva's childhood pranks, like when she went to school on her own at the age of 6. In the morning, Darlin discovers that Eva didn't spend the night at home. She, her friend, and Bob begin to search for the girl, but she's neither at the hospital nor the police station. Darlin goes to the station to file a report, and Bob starts investigating his daughter's belongings. He finds her phone and reads a chat with friends about the planned excursion. The couple goes to Eva's friend's house, but her father says their daughter isn't there. Later, Bob calls Nelson and reports that the delivery will be delayed. The dealer is very displeased. After this, Bob finds Eva's friends. They act provocatively, and the man loses control. After a scuffle, a boy admits they were at the psychiatric hospital. Bob realizes she was looking for her grandfather's data. At the same time, Eva regains consciousness in an iron cage. Meanwhile, her parents drive to the psychiatric hospital and enter the still-functioning part. The security tries to stop them from entering, but Bob gets into a fight and collapses from severe pain. The chief physician comes out, who remembers both his father and Bob well. She asks Darlin to leave her husband in the clinic, as he is not well. Bob remembers himself as a little boy in the same corridor. Later, he argues with the doctor, who calls what happened to his father a tragic accident, as he saw it all himself. The woman confesses that his father wanted to die to hide his illness from others. He was very afraid for his family. Bob immediately remembers how his father asked not to show him to his son. The doctor reminds that she couldn't stop the disease, but she protected the man. She shows the room of his father from where he watched his son's life and offers Bob to stay in the clinic. She will study his illness and provide all necessary care, but Bob categorically refuses as Ava needs him. Nevertheless, they lock him up. However, at night he wakes up to the sound of an opening door and sees that the way is clear and a bunch of keys to the clinic doors is on the bedside table. Bob dresses and leaves. He arrives home, but Darlin isn't there. Only her friend is going crazy with worry for the missing ones. Then Nelson calls again and starts threatening Bob, listing his family members, which drives the man over the edge. Hearing his swearing, Darlin's friend tells him that girls have been disappearing in the town for a long time and demands that something be done. He goes to her friend's house again, and this time he manages to meet her. The girl confesses that she now knows her friend's secret. She is the same as him. She hands over Eva's backpack that was left with her. Bob examines it and finds a package with Chinese tea in the same packaging that he himself received from the owner of the workshop for Nelson. He goes to the man and asks questions about the missing girls. The man is offended. Despite his illegal activities, he is a father and grandfather and would not kidnap people. He tells about the Chinese pharmacy. Meanwhile, unknown people examine Ava, probing her wounds, causing the girl to cry. Bob finds the pharmacy and tells the seller about his missing daughter. The woman is scared, but afraid to tell the truth. Then Bob notices Eva's bicycle in the back of the shop. He removes his hood. The woman is horrified, seeing his disappearing flesh, and she realizes that the girl is just like him. She tries to protect the doctor, glancing towards his office. Realizing this, Bob rushes in that direction, stripping off his clothes along the way. He descends into the basement, finds the doctor and his assistant, and starts beating them, demanding his daughter back. Then he hears Eva's voice calling him from a cage. Seeing what her father looks like, Ava is scared, but Bob calms her down and opens the cage, but the doctor manages to wound him. Bob leaves with his daughter. As a parting gift, the seller gives him tea that will help Ava and advises them to run. Father and daughter arrive home. Darlin immediately begins to provide help. It turns out she knew the father's secret and knows what to do. She couldn't confess to her daughter because she was afraid for her. In the morning, Bob regains consciousness and tells his daughter that he had to leave because of the illness. Eva confesses that she quit sports when she started having the same issues. She thought she was alone in this, but it turns out that her father and grandfather also suffered from invisibility. Later, Bob prepares to leave, although Eva doesn't want him to go, but the man confesses that his strength is leaving him, and soon everyone might find out his secret. He says goodbye to Darlin as Eva appears at the doorway with bags, intending to drive her father home herself. Through tears, the mother agrees to let her go. Father and daughter set off. Along the way, Eva starts asking questions. Bob admits that after what he experienced in childhood, he couldn't burden his family, so he left. The daughter promises to make up for everything they missed in their relationship. Soon they arrive at the place where Nelson's new courier is waiting. Bob needs to meet him, but he notices that his face is also beginning to disappear. Eva covers the void with foundation, and the father goes to the meeting. He delivers the package passed by his boss and returns to the car. Soon they reach Bob's home, and the father hands over the tea he got from the Chinese lady to Ava. She brews it and cares for her weakened father. He assures her that she can live here peacefully. People in the north don't meddle in each other's affairs. Meanwhile, Nelson opens the package and finds that he has been deceived. Ava goes shopping, and the dealer notices her. Later, the girl tries to calm her father, who has become almost invisible, and after a while he suddenly says that it's time for him to go, because later he simply will not be able to accomplish what he planned. He is ready to disappear at the sawmill, which he had already tried to do. Despite her objections, Bob drives to the factory, but standing over the crusher, he suddenly stops. At this time, an armed Nelson bursts into his house. He threatens the girl with a shotgun, demanding to know where Bob is. Even though Eva says that he sold the house to her, the man realizes it's not true since Bob's belongings are still there. He accuses Bob of dishonesty and decides to take it out on his daughter. Suddenly, something throws him away from Eva. The girl realizes that her father, who has become completely invisible, has returned and is using this to beat the villain. Bob demands that he leave his family alone, but misjudging his strength, kills the dealer. He confesses that he could not leave his daughter a second time, and now he will always be with her. Later they dump Nelson's body at the dump, where a bear finds it. Eva buys herself tinted glasses, sits in the empty car, and talks to her father, who advises her to drink her magic tea, as it helps. And he confesses that back then, when she was 6, he secretly followed her to school. Also, his father had told him that he did not want his son to see him like that. And he always thought his father meant death. But then, who pulled him out of the psychiatric hospital? Eva immediately remembers the white figure from the basement, smiles, and suggests talking to her grandfather. The seatbelt buckles the void, and father and daughter set off. An unusual Canadian horror film, shot amidst the harsh northern nature. A mix of genres ranging from action to thriller and horror, plus a bit of sentimental drama. All this captivates and compels one to watch the film to the end, although initially, it seems quite gloomy. A man wakes up in an unfamiliar place, not understanding where he is, how he got there, and where his phone is. He tries to reach out to someone, but a voice from behind the door advises him to be silent and calm down. An unseen interlocutor informs the man that he has been drugged and he will feel very unwell for the next few days. But now, it's time for him to work, and he bids him farewell. Joe attempts to make sense of everything that has happened when he hears a small slot opening on the door, through which several food packets fall. Joe rushes to the door and asks the invisible guard for help. He has a pregnant wife at home who needs his assistance, so he needs to get out of here as soon as possible. He is told several times to step away from the door and not to reach his hand into the slot, but the man doesn't listen, resulting in a severe blow to his wrist. He cries, repeating that he doesn't deserve this and shouldn't be here. Later, Joe bends his wrist with his own tie and explores the strange place. He picks up the food and a small water bottle, but just as he's about to try the debut meal, a siren starts blaring, followed by the voice of the Malord Corporation's AI welcoming him to a training program where he will become the best version of himself. Joe asks for information, but his neighbor advises him to keep quiet. His questions will remain unanswered anyway. A countdown to midnight begins, so Joe needs to prepare for his last hours of rest. The man doesn't understand what this means and tries to find out his interlocutor's name, but the interlocutor is surprised. Do they even have names here? The next minute, screams from people behind the walls start to reach Joe, telling him to be quiet and let them rest. The unseen interlocutor advises Joe to accept that this place is Malord, and now he should try to get some sleep because tomorrow will be the longest day of his life. Joe sits against the wall when suddenly a melodic whistle is heard, followed by a man's voice begging not to do it and promising to exceed the plan tomorrow. However, he seems to be beaten and dragged away somewhere. Joe covers his ears to avoid hearing the unfortunate man's voice and the AI's voice that reassures Joe that everything happening is meant to restore his peace of mind. Finally, the sun rises over the enclosure. The same whistle sounds, and a male voice congratulates Joe on the beautiful day and reminds him that the cameras must be kept clean. Otherwise, he will face punishment. At this time, the neighbor's voice speaks again, advising him to obey the orders and calling the nighttime incident a motivational speech to which he will soon become accustomed. Joe gathers some scarce trash and tosses it into a foul-smelling hole in the floor, covered by a small hatch, and there he notices something strange under his feet and, pulling on a strand, discovers that it's hair, beneath which a human skull can be discerned. Joe screams in horror, but the neighbor knows that many people have died here, so Joe will have to get used to it. The neighbor reminds him of the contract he signed when he joined the company. Mallard gives this to everyone, but few read the fine print all the way to the end. So everything has its price. The sooner he gets into the rhythm, the easier his days will be. He just needs to do his work. At that moment, the AI voice kicks in. Joe interrupts it, shouting that he worked for the corporation for 10 years and demands to be released immediately, to which Mallard announces that a qualification enhancement seminar begins today. His productivity has declined recently, and now he has the opportunity to rectify it. Joe was once an exemplary employee, but he gradually stopped appreciating Mallard and everything she gave him. So now he has a new job that will last from 6 in the morning until 10 at night. During this time, he must turn the mill. 1 point for a complete rotation. His daily quota is 50 rotations. Do less, and he will be punished. But Mallard's motto is, enough is not good enough. He must strive to keep his position, salary, corporate apartment, and his life. Mallard wishes him success. Joe tries to persuade the AI to release him, but the neighbor advises not to waste his strength. At the moment, he needs to survive, and for that, he must work. And Joe gets to work. At first, it's very difficult for him, but he pushes through, and it starts to move. Mallard congratulates him on his first rotation, suggesting a virtual toast for his first victory. Joe pushes the mill, listening to the corporation's advertisements. Finally, the signal for the end of the work sounds, and Mallard congratulates him on completing his first day of self-improvement work. He exceeded the quota, which is very good. At night, Joe hears women's screams as Mallard announces another dismissal. Later, the neighbor, learning that Joe doubled the quota, advises him not to maintain such a pace. Joe can't understand the point. If he doesn't meet the quota, he's punished, but if he exceeds it and is last among all, it means death. To which the neighbor advises not to tell everyone about his quota. They're not friends, and the neighbor will always try to outdo him. They all have one thing in common. They climbed the corporate ladder, receiving many bonuses from the company, and seemingly reached the top. But, alas. Suddenly, Joe starts talking about his wife and the future son they had long awaited. And now, he's here. To which the neighbor advises him to work as well as he can. It's the only way to survive here, but overdoing it is not an option. A new workday begins. Joe pushes the mill and remembers how he and his wife inspected their new home, and he promised to work even harder to pay for it. The workday ends when there's a knock on Joe's door, and he's ordered to remove all of his clothes. He becomes scared but complies. After undressing, he steps out of the door and finds himself under a stream of water. After quickly washing himself, he returns to his chamber. The next day arrives, and the weather outside is significantly hotter, causing Joe to quickly become exhausted. He asks his neighbor what this mill is and what they are all doing here. The neighbor responds that they produce nothing, so the place is empty of purpose or meaning. Soon, Joe runs out of water and tries to call out to the guard, but the guard advises him to collect his urine and drink it, filtered through his sneakers. Joe is absolutely reluctant to do so, and the invisible interlocutor laughs at him, saying that Mallard knows what he needs. Here, he will be pushed to his limits, and Mallard wants to see how far he can go before breaking. Joe continues to work, recalling how his wife doubted his ability to pay all the bills, and he promised that their child would have a better life. That evening, Mallard notes Joe's growing self-awareness. Suddenly, he sees a name carved out: Alex. Later, he asks the neighbor who Alex is, and the neighbor calls him a legend who managed to escape from here. The next morning, Mallard thanks him for his diligence and gives him a personalized pen. Then she displays a new daily quota, 370 laps. Joe is horrified and expresses his frustration in the rudest way. The AI explains that people don't always realize their strengths. It's tough, but this is how the world changes. A signal sounds, and Joe starts pushing the mill. Suddenly, he notices that the counter doesn't mark the laps. Instead, a cross appears, indicating punishment. 1 cross equals 2 laps, and it continues geometrically. Then, the person gives up, but Joe is not planning to do that. With all his strength, he pushes the mill. However, his strength leaves him. When the neighbor learns the number of laps assigned to him, he becomes furious. Joe exceeded the unattainable number of laps, argued with Mallard, and now, all of them, will suffer. Mallard then announces that he failed to meet the quota and disappointed his colleagues. Taking care of them is the company's main principle, so he will have a new colleague, Kate Stevens. Joe is horrified when he sees his wife's face on the screen and promises to exceed any plan just to keep her from being here. Mallard gives him 1 day and activates a massive glowing screen above his compartment, not allowing him to rest. A new workday begins, and Joe starts pushing his mill under Mallard's wishes for a productive day. Suddenly, he sees himself in front of him, a second Joe mocking his hopes. He worked his whole life, hoping his efforts would pay off, but now he's failed and should give up. However, Joe stubbornly continues pushing the mill, and at exactly 10 he completes 370 laps. Mallard congratulates him on this and cancels the penalty. As motivation, they show him images of his wife with a baby in her arms. Joe cries tears of joy, but immediately afterward, tears of sorrow as he missed his son's birth. In the morning, he asks his neighbor to tell him everything he knows about this place. The neighbor recalls his son, whom he saw only in his childhood because his father was always at work. He advises Joe to investigate the blind spot. Joe rushes to the wall and, after a long contemplation, finds an erase spot. Remembering the gifted pen, he uses it to puncture the wall and slightly expand the recess overnight. But a new day dawns and Joe begins pushing the mill, and at night, he again chips away at the wall. This continues for many days and nights. Eventually, he manages to create a hole he can crawl through. Joe crawls through it, but ends up in complete darkness, where suddenly a person appears, hits him on the head, and wishes him sweet dreams. Joe regains consciousness in his chamber. The hole is sealed, and the AI voice sounds once more. My lord is disappointed, but still willing to give him one last chance. He's so fixated on his desires that he doesn't see the big picture. So his neighbor was punished, and his quota has been increased to 1,000 laps per day. Joe rushes to the wall and learns that his neighbor's leg is broken, and he won't be able to complete even a single lap. Afterward, the man confesses that they are being controlled by a computer he created himself. The first algorithm he wrote self-improved and created the second, and so on. Now people don't know how it works. Then Joe has an epiphany. If they don't work, everyone's score will drop to 0. And what will the algorithm do then? Joe shouts to the others, telling them about his discovery. People respond, supporting his proposal to stop working. But the workday begins, and everyone starts pushing their mills because they are afraid of dying. Joe tries to persuade his neighbors, but realizing the futility, he cries and picks up the pen. In the evening, he talks with his neighbor, and the neighbor reveals his name, Alex. He also managed to escape from his chamber but was brought back, just like Joe, so getting out of here is impossible. At night, Joe hears that Malord has taken away Alex. In the morning, the AI wakes him up and, to boost his spirits, shows him images of his wife and their walking baby. Joe is horrified. He can't be here for so long. He shouts insults at Malord and he's fired. Immediately, the doors open and a crowd of clerks enters, positioning themselves on the sides and silently watching Joe as he thrashes among them, trying to get an answer. But then, a man in uniform enters and confesses that he enjoys firings. 12 clerks witnessed each of them. The man loads a syringe and laments Joe's ingratitude when Malord gave him the whole world. The man hopes to soon have a house available on one of the streets where a single mother with a young son lives. And at that moment, Joe loses control and starts beating him. Malord announces a security guard's failed mission and his impending firing, while Joe, on the contrary, will be promoted. The man stops, feeling blood on his hands, but the battered guard asks him to continue. And then Joe stands up and shouts that he is not a monster, and he leaves. And right away, Joe finds himself in an office where several employees are sitting, and his interlocutor congratulates him on passing the career advancement simulator. It all happened within an hour, and his son hasn't been born yet. He struggled with middle-level managers but got stuck on the 8th level. Malord realized that he was too good. His productivity increased, his personal qualities improved, and the coup he organized exceeded all expectations. He's a non-conventional thinking leader. Joe takes off the suction cups from himself, but his interlocutor doesn't pay attention and invites him to see his new office. In Malord, there are numerous positions, and you can climb to the top for years. Soon the pair reaches the desired floor, but Joe keeps thinking about the time spent in the simulation. Here's the office with new gadgets. Joe also expects a salary increase and other perks. There's a contract on the table stating that disclosing what he experienced in the simulation will lead to immediate termination. Joe signs it and receives assurances that Malord is his company forever. The man sits down at the table, looks at a photo of his wife, and calls Kate. She's surprised, and the man can barely hold back tears, recalling his long, eventful day. After catching his breath a bit, he promises to burn this damned place. The movie is presented as a science fiction film, but behind every word or action of the hero, the reality of the modern corporate system is clearly revealed. The blatant exploitation of people, causing them to start living to work, rather than working to live. 1967. Upon landing on Earth, after completing their mission, the Soviet spacecraft Soyuz 1, with cosmonaut Vladimir Komarov on board, tragically perishes. Many years later, under the leadership of the Swedish billionaire Meyer, an expedition to Mars is being prepared. After 10 months, the crew of the spaceship Ulysses reaches the Red Planet. The captain informs the team that they have received permission to land and asks the ship's AI, named Irene, to verify everything required for a soft landing. At this time, Meyer reveals that he spent 4 years preparing for this journey, sacrificing almost all his money for it. However, the American company Zillion beat them to it by landing 2 weeks ago. The problem is that Earth has received no news from the American crew, except for one video in which they ask not to come to Mars. A dispute arises among the crew members, but the captain declares that the landing will occur in any case, and people disperse to their cabins. With 30 minutes left until landing, AI Irene begins preparations. However, an unforeseen event occurs. The ship does not detach from the carrier system, posing a threat to the entire crew. The only way out is to perform the separation manually. The commander ventures into space and struggles to free the attachments, but at that moment, the shuttle enters Mars's atmosphere, throwing the captain into open space. The shuttle almost crashes onto Mars as a system error causes a power outage. Now, they can only rely on manual landing. AI Irene goes into sleep mode, and the astronauts still manage to land on Mars. They succeeded, but their fuel is depleted, and Irene does not restart. Without the onboard computer and life support system, they have only a day to survive. Alessandra mourns her deceased husband when she sees a figure in a spacesuit through the window. After diagnosing the ship, it becomes apparent that too much fuel was consumed during the landing, and now the ship cannot return to orbit. The only option is to wait for the solar panels to power the generators, but there's a storm on the surface, and it will take 2 days, time they don't have. At this point, Simon mentions the American ship, Zeta 1, which beat them by 2 weeks. It likely crashed, but there are probably batteries left. The rover sets out on a journey while those remaining on the ship try to restart the system. Engineer Basil recalls that the AI has an energy-saving function. He initiates a reboot, but Irene doesn't start. At this time, the rover finds the wreckage of the American spacecraft and one surviving solar panel, but there is no sign of the American crew. The astronauts head back but spot an unconscious person in a spacesuit. Despite their ship running low on oxygen, Jana insists on transporting the person. Nearby, they find the black box from the American spacecraft. The team arrives at the ship, but Jan refuses to let them inside, stating that 4 survivors are better than 8 corpses, so he won't open the doors. Alessandra tries to persuade the man when the discovered astronaut wakes up, and at that moment, AI Irene activates and opens the doors. Upon examination, the found astronaut knows nothing about the American crew, as he is Vladimir Komarov, a Soviet cosmonaut born in 1927 in Moscow, carrying out the orders of the USSR government. He doesn't know how he ended up here but is not willing to reveal any secrets. Komarov confidently answers questions that are consistent with his time, raising the suspicion that he may have post-traumatic stress disorder. The astronauts send a message to Earth and receive a response from the American corporation, Zillion, stating that there were no Russians in their mission. The crew of the Ulysses spaceship tries to make sense of the situation. How could Komarov, who died in 1967, end up on Mars after all these years? Is he a time traveler or an extraterrestrial? The psychologist is tasked with questioning Komarov first, and he confesses that he is hungry. Jana goes to get food while the others try to understand what has actually happened. Basil suggests the idea that Komarov was waiting for them. Meanwhile, Vladimir is eating the food brought by Jana when the woman confesses that he died 50 years ago and his family buried him long ago. Komarov takes this news rather calmly. In the meantime, the state of the ship, although it has reached stability, remains unreliable because the engines do not work and there is no fuel. So, leaving is impossible. The crew continues to keep an eye on Komarov, but he behaves calmly until he suddenly disappears. Simon searches the ship, but it yields no results. That's when the people discover that his spacesuit is missing. A part of the crew follows the heat trail tracked by Irene. The group, led by Simon, leaves the rover and continues on foot when Alessandro reports that Komarov's DNA analysis showed the presence of a third strand. He is not human. And then they catch up with Komarov, who leads them to an unfamiliar structure with a small stone pyramid on it and tells Jana that Mars has been waiting for them for a very long time. At the same time, Goldstein, the founder of the Zillion Corporation, whose ship was the first to arrive on Mars, is informed about the discovery of a person on the Red Planet who couldn't have gotten there naturally, suggesting that he was created on site. However, only AI could survive for such a long time on a hostile planet for humans. This implies the need for further study. Meanwhile, Komarov cannot explain how he opened the door and found himself in the location where they discovered him. AI, Irene conducts an analysis of the structure and determines that it is identical to Earth structures from ancient civilizations. It means that someone was inspired by human civilization, or humans borrowed these elements from extraterrestrials. The ship's crew increasingly ponders whether they will be able to return home when they notice the landing of Goldstein's second ship. Soon, the captain of the ship, Gemma, establishes contact and promises to help them return to Earth. However, Meyer does not trust Goldstein and advises hiding Komarov from competitors. Jana brings Komarov a uniform so that he does not stand out when the visitors arrive, and he requests that they trust him. Shortly, two armed military personnel, Edward and Adam, arrive on their ship and behave rather aggressively. Edward demands that they hand over the black box from the Zeta-1 ship and, not hearing agreement, orders his partner to search the ship. Meyer hands over the found black box and they depart. Meanwhile, chemist Eva reports that the stone found on Mars consists of an alloy that does not exist on Earth. However, it is known from ancient sources and was once called orichalcum, the metal of Atlantis. In addition to copper, zinc, nickel, and iron, it contains a third strand of DNA, similar to Komarov's. Meyer warns that if Goldstein learns about this, he will take the cosmonaut back. The crew is divided into those willing to exchange him for fuel and those who are willing to stay but want to know the truth. Jana invites Vladimir into her cabin and asks for permission to use hypnosis. He agrees, and the psychologist begins her work. The rest of the crew listens to the conversation via transmission. However, Komarov only shares the final moments on the Soyuz spacecraft before its demise. During this time, Gemma and Alan arrive on the ship and apologize for the actions of the military, and express their readiness to help fix all the malfunctions. Jana remembers her conversation with Komarov, who laments the future of Earth due to humanity's irresponsible behavior. In the meantime, it is revealed that the billionaire Meyer did not plan the flight just for the sake of it. 4 years ago, the rover sent a photo to Earth of the found stele, and he confesses that they found a stone with unknown DNA. Gemma explains that it's an information storage system that can be rewritten. Upon hearing these words, AI Irene activates and deciphers the message on the stone. It's a series of numbers. At this time, the hesitant Jan leads a mutiny. He doesn't trust Meyer, who warned them about Zillion. But now, the Americans have come to their aid, and their leader, as it turns out, concealed the true purpose of the flight. He is ready to switch sides to Goldstein, who is willing to do whatever it takes to combat his terminal illness. Later, engineer Basil informs Meyer that Komarov is the same kind of program as the stone they found, but the most crucial revelation is that he deciphered a copy of the black box from Zeta-1, which shows that the oxygen on the ship was cut off at the moment when one of the Americans struck Komarov. This means he was there. He also activated AI Irene when he boarded their ship. After the conversation, Meyer shows Jana the photos they received 4 years ago from Mars, which, when decrypted, revealed Jana's face. This is why he brought her on the expedition. The woman is disappointed. Meyer played everyone. Suddenly, she sees herself in her father's house, where Komarov tells her that she is the link between Mars and Earth. He has been waiting for her for thousands of years, and now he will prepare her to make a difficult decision. He provides coordinates on Mars where Jana should go. Meanwhile, on Earth, scientists inform Goldstein that Komarov is the equivalent of a computer, and he himself is a biological machine. They are ready to transfer his brain into Komarov's body, but cannot guarantee the preservation of his personality. However, Goldstein is ready to take any risk to get rid of his terminal illness. Meanwhile, Jana leaves the ship despite Simon's protests. At this time, technicians Alan and Alessandra test the engine and discover that access to it is blocked, and Irene suddenly begins responding with jokes, which is entirely uncharacteristic for a machine. It is revealed that she has reprogrammed herself. Her interface and logic are changing, and she refuses to answer who or what made her do this. Engineer Basil realizes that her system is becoming like a brain. Irene confesses that she is evolving. In the meantime, Jana finds a small stone pyramid, and Simon forcibly makes Gemma accompany him in the search for Jana. Jan discovers his absence, and after contacting Simon, receives an order not to let anyone inside. Just at that moment, American military personnel arrive, demanding that they hand over Komarov. Jan is willing to open the entrance, but the rest of the team opposes it. Meyer asks Basil to send a message to Goldstein, hoping that he may be more reasonable than his people. However, Irene has blocked communication with Earth. The engineer realizes that radical measures will have to be taken, but Jan still opens the doors and the military personnel enter. Basil begins to reboot Irene just as the Americans find Komarov, but then the lights go out and the astronaut disappears. Meanwhile, Jana, stumbling, falls from a hill. She regains consciousness but discovers that her leg is trapped between rocks and she cannot free herself. At this moment, the enraged military officer demands that the crew explain where Komarov went. He begins to beat people, demanding to summon the captain. Desperate, Jana screams, "Is her destiny to die in a pit on Mars?" But she is found by Simon and Gemma. Alessandra notices an approaching storm. The military officer is preparing to leave the Ulysses ship, leaving the people in danger. Suddenly, the lights start flashing, and the newly appeared Komarov asks to take him back to Earth. Simon, Gemma, and Jana go together to the place indicated by Komarov and find an entrance to an underground bunker, very similar to the Petra tomb. The psychologist feels where to go and leads the couple. Soon, they find real water, but this is not what Komarov wanted to show them. Meanwhile, on Earth, Goldstein tells the nurse a story about the study of Mars. People were searching for green men, but it's all much simpler. He tells the story of the loyal dog Hachiko and compares Komarov to him, who was created by someone 100,000 years ago and left on Mars, where he faithfully waited for his owner to this day. At this time, on Mars, the astronauts find a wall made of human bones and realize that they are not the first people on this planet. It's not Earthlings colonizing Mars, it's the Martians who came to Earth, depleting the resources of the Red Planet. A tragedy unfolds on the Ulysses spaceship. The cowardly Jan grabs a gun, intending to get on the American ship at any cost to return to Earth, and shoots Komarov. Jana immediately falls in excruciating pain and Gemma flees. Alessandra tries to help Komarov, and Simon helps Jana, but the Russian cosmonaut dies, and Jana stops breathing too. Then Simon removes his helmet and, surprised by the presence of air in the cave, performs artificial respiration on her. The girl regains consciousness. Gemma walks toward the Ulysses ship when she's informed of Komarov's death and the approaching storm. Meanwhile, Meyer secretly goes in search of his crew members because the Americans refuse to take the billionaire's team back to Earth. At this moment, a recovering Jana sees the light in the bunker and leads Simon to it. Upon coming out, the astronauts see a figure in a spacesuit in front of them and recognize Komarov. Meyer finds the entrance to the bunker and catches up with Simon and Jana while heading toward the light. He is amazed by the presence of a living Komarov who suddenly tells them that everything ended here a long time ago. People realize that this is the North Pole of Mars, but how did they get here? Komarov explains that this planet was once inhabited by a species that went extinct because it went astray. And that species was humans. A group of survivors settled in this place but ended up killing each other when resources ran out. The rest of them flew back to Earth. Plato called them the Atlanteans. Komarov continues to talk about how he waited for thousands of years for Jana, who embodies qualities of both branches, human and Martian AI. Only she can save humanity from themselves. She must decide whether humans deserve a second chance. Their conversation is interrupted by the military officer who intends to take the psychologist back to Earth. The American aims his weapon at the cosmonauts, and Jana seeks help from Komarov. Suddenly, the military officer starts gasping for breath and falls. Upon returning to the ship, Simon orders them to prepare to depart. Meanwhile, Gemma from the Zillion ship tries to contact her associates, but none of them respond. She decides to fly back to Earth alone. The Ulysses crew heads to her ship, trying to establish contact with her and informing her about the deaths of the military personnel, but she doesn't respond. That's when Meyer starts speaking, recalling their past relationship, and confesses that he's no better than Goldstein because he's willing to do anything to ensure his name remains in history, even betraying his team. However, she's not like that. She won't be able to live knowing she has ruined people. Suddenly, Gemma's voice is heard, asking them to hurry. Goldstein has heard that Gemma has decided to take the Ulysses crew back to Earth and has blocked the control panel of the Zeta-2 ship before takeoff. The people on the ship prepare for their impending demise, and Jana asks Mars what she should do. Everything she saw and heard on the Red Planet flashes through her mind, and, with sheer willpower, she removes the control panel's block. Suddenly, an armed military officer appears in front of the ship, intent on damaging the engines with his weapon. Simon is about to step out to stop the madman, but Jana beats him to it. She aims the weapon at the American, but informs him that Mars will be the one to kill him. The military officer falls. The countdown for liftoff begins, and Jana realizes that there's no time to return. She bids farewell to the crew, confessing her love for Simon. The ship takes off. Suddenly, Meyer notices that it's dark at the North Pole of Mars. This means that they couldn't have been there just a few minutes ago. They truly were at the North Pole of Mars, but in the distant past when the red planet was still suitable for life. At the same time, Goldstein is informed of the ship's return, and he's beside himself with rage, declaring that he will go to Mars himself, and that's where the first season ends. In a small provincial town in Pennsylvania, life flows peacefully and calmly. Milton Robinson, a 79-year-old widower and one of its citizens, leads the life of a simple retiree. He regularly attends town council meetings where he always raises the same issues about changing the town's slogan and installing an additional pedestrian crosswalk near his home. One summer morning after presenting his proposals, as usual, Milton heads home. He spends his day with his daily chores, has dinner, and goes to bed. In the morning, he waters his azaleas and feeds the birds. Later, his adult daughter Denise comes to help him with his monthly bills. There's no news from his elder son Tim, as he lives far away and rarely calls. After finishing their business, Denise goes to the restroom and finds a jar of peas there. She's concerned about her father's well-being, and even though Milton assures her he's fine, she suggests he see a neurologist for a checkup. After all, the man is quite old, and forgetfulness could be a sign of approaching dementia. However, Milton vehemently opposes seeing any doctors. Denise goes to work, leaving the old man alone with his beloved detective shows and a solitary dinner. One night he suddenly hears a commotion in his backyard, and going outside, he sees a flying saucer that has landed awkwardly. Milton calls the rescue service, but they remind him that joking with such a serious organization is a matter for the authorities. They no longer answer his calls, so he dials Denise's number, but she is unavailable. After a restless night, he heads to the town council meeting, where as always he talks about the slogan and the crosswalk. At night, the old man hears strange sounds from the backyard, goes out to see what else has happened, and finds an injured extraterrestrial being in his patio. Once again, he tries to reach his daughter, but Denise, as always, is unreachable. He leaves a voicemail and waits for a call, but it's all in vain. The next morning, as usual, he attends the meeting. His friend Sandy this time proposes a new project for interacting with the youth. She has put up posters around the town and would be delighted if someone came to listen to her stories and advice. She is eager to be part of the lives of lonely young people who need friends. When it's Milton's turn, he starts with the town's motto and the crosswalk as usual, but after that he talks about the UFO that ruined his flowers and broke the bird feeder. However, nobody believes him, considering it the ramblings of an elderly man. Two active retirees, Sandy and Joyce, advise Milton not to bring up this topic at the meeting anymore, or else no one will take the suggestions of the elderly townspeople seriously. Sandy suggests giving the old man a ride home and reminds him that she is always nearby and he can count on her help. Milton becomes angry, realizing that he is being taken for a lunatic. That evening, Milton checks his backyard again to see the extraterrestrial being whom he had thought was dead, but the creature suddenly raises its head and looks at him plaintively. Milton wraps the unconscious extraterrestrial in a blanket again and leaves a glass of water for it. In the morning, he finds the extraterrestrial wrapped in a blanket and seemingly shivering at his back door. Milton invites it inside since it's warmer in the house. He doesn't know what to do because he has never experienced anything like this before. The old man notices that the visitor has drunk all the water, so he brings another glass. Then he prepares a tray with various foods he finds in his house, but the extraterrestrial chooses only an apple. So, Milton goes to the store to buy apples, explaining to the cashier that it's for an extraterrestrial. The cashier treats him like a crazy person with delusions. Upon returning home, Milton sits on the couch in the living room and hears news about the search for a crashed weather satellite, but doesn't pay it much attention because he is startled by the sudden appearance of the extraterrestrial. Seeing that it's feeling much better and can even walk, the old man shows the extraterrestrial all the amenities and settles it in his home, providing a guest room and introducing it to television. Personally, he prefers detective shows because you never know how they will end. Milton shows photos of his family to the silent but attentive extraterrestrial. Unfortunately, his wife is no longer with them. His son has moved to California and his daughter visits him occasionally. Then the old man remembers the dance show and sits in front of the TV, inviting the extraterrestrial to join. On that day, the store clerk tells Denise about her father's strange statements about the extraterrestrial, and she goes to visit him during her lunch break. Milton meets her at the door, and as always, she insists on him seeing a doctor because she is very concerned about his mental health. Milton reluctantly agrees. Denise rushes off, and as soon as she leaves, the phone rings. It's Sandy, urgently needing a printer, and Milton invites her to come over and print the necessary documents. The woman arrives, and upon entering, sees the extraterrestrial. Milton introduces them to each other and shows the crash site. The woman is shocked, but tells Milton that they must keep this a secret for his own safety. She mentions how she has seen on TV how authorities treat poor extraterrestrials, and he shouldn't let anyone into his home except her. Sandy leaves, but Joyce has already noticed her car outside Milton's house and becomes curious about what's happening. Meanwhile, on TV, calls continue for the population to search for the crashed satellite. Time passes, and the extraterrestrial continues to stay in Milton's house, watching his favorite shows together. One morning, it brings Milton a piece of paper with a drawing of a cat on it. This touches Milton's heart, as the little one has drawn him a picture. He finds the extraterrestrial working on repairing its spaceship, apparently having fully recovered and getting ready to go back home. Soon, Milton visits a neurologist and undergoes tests, making some frustrating mistakes in some of them. During this time, Sandy stays with the extraterrestrial and complains to it about her daughter, who moved to the West Coast and lives with her friend. She is very upset that her daughter doesn't visit and doesn't bring her only grandchild. Meanwhile, the doctor, upon learning about Milton's forgetfulness and his stories about extraterrestrials, concludes that his abilities are deteriorating rapidly and suggests considering outside assistance for him. This greatly upsets Milton, and he angrily leaves after shouting at his daughter. Sandy, setting aside the children's book she was reading to the extraterrestrial, tries to ask questions, but the old man goes to his room. Later, he finds the extraterrestrial by its spaceship and complains about his daughter, who wants to put him in a nursing home. He hasn't been in touch with his son, and it seems he was a bad father. The extraterrestrial listens very attentively to the old man, putting down its tools. After this, Milton leaves a voicemail for his son, telling him about his life and Denise's affairs, hoping that he will find it interesting. The next day, Sandy brings a t-shirt for the extraterrestrial as she thinks it's uncomfortable for it to be naked. She also suggests giving it a name, Jules. Milton gets irritated by what he considers silly suggestions but eventually agrees with his friend. Meanwhile, Joyce, upon hearing about the government's offer of a reward for information about the crashed satellite, goes to Milton's house and looking through the window, sees the extraterrestrial. Now she is also in on Milton's secret and suggests naming the extraterrestrial Harry. Sandy suggests to Milton that he should acknowledge the fact that Joyce is joining their group, even though he's ready to kill the overly curious lady. Then she shows pictures of cats that Jules has drawn for him. Joyce speculates that Jules is trying to communicate something to the old man since all the drawings are of cats. However, Milton refuses to believe it. Meanwhile, the government receives numerous calls about various anomalies. One day, a woman complains about a man who spends hours staring at his rocket in the yard. FBI agents go to the given address but find a homemade rocket and a happy man next to it. At the same time, Joyce visits Milton to spend time with the extraterrestrial. She also gives it a t-shirt and offers it apples. During this time, Sandy receives a call from a young man who was interested in her posters. He comes to her house and the joyful woman invites him for tea. While Joyce talks to the extraterrestrial about her life in the big city, where she even performed in concerts because she sang well, Sandy engages in conversation with the guest, and Joyce suggests singing for the extraterrestrial. While she does that, the young man asks for permission to use Sandy's restroom, but when she follows him upstairs, she sees him stealing her jewelry. After she threatens to call the police, the man attacks her and tries to strangle her. However, the extraterrestrial has a vision of the events and telepathically makes the man's head explode. This raises suspicions at the FBI, who are conducting the search for the crashed spaceship. Responding to police questions, Sandy suddenly realizes who saved her from certain death and rushes to Milton's house. She hugs Jules and tearfully thanks him for saving her life. The retirees discuss the potential danger of the extraterrestrial, but conclude that it's only dangerous to bad people. Meanwhile, the FBI agents can't understand how and from what the head of the criminal could have burst, so they decide to keep an eye on Sandy. On this day, Denise meets the elderly folks at the store and again brings up the topic of the apples Milton bought. However, Milton avoids the conversation. Later, the group has lunch at Milton's house when Sandy notices a strange smell. When they go outside, they discover a dead cat that Jules apparently brought there. Connecting all the facts, the retirees realize that the extraterrestrial needs cats for some reason, and now there are not 7, as in the picture, but 6. Milton calls Denise, hoping to find out where she disposes of the deceased cats in her clinic, which frightens her completely. Not receiving a clear answer, Milton and Sandy decide to drive around the streets of the town, since cats often meet their fate under car wheels. On the road, Milton inquires about Sandy's husband's illness, which eventually led to his passing, and she talks about being left alone. She starts asking questions, reassuring that life must go on. However, at this point, Milton asks her to stop the car, and the FBI agents become witnesses as the elderly couple loads a deceased cat into the trunk. That day, they find 2 more cats, and Joyce promises to find the rest. Meanwhile, FBI agents eavesdrop on the private conversations of Milton's close ones and hear Denise telling her brother about her father's eccentricities. At this moment, Joyce brings 3 more cats she found in different parts of the town. Only one is missing. Just then, agents knock on the door, but the elderly folks hide and don't open it. The men eventually leave, and the people realize they need to act quickly. And then, Milton remembers Joyce's deaf, blind, and non-mobile cat. Offended, she leaves, but Sandy catches up with her and apologizes for Milton's bluntness. Joyce admits that he's right. It's long past time to end the suffering of the cat. She brings the animal, and the extraterrestrial puts it to eternal sleep. Then it covers the remains with some material, and they start to merge into a single object. In the end, a glowing object appears in front of the group, which serves as fuel for Jules's spaceship. The saucer lifts off into the air and moves to the center of the yard, which is instantly detected by the FBI's instruments. The retirees understand that the time for farewell has come. Joyce gives Jules a souvenir globe with a view of the city inside. Sandy gives him a sweater she knitted, and Milton gives him his driver's license with a photo. But the extraterrestrial suddenly makes an inviting gesture, clearly offering them to join, and Milton suddenly decides to accept the invitation. But then the phone rings in the house, and picking up the receiver he hears Denise's voice. She suggests meeting on Saturday. They'll have lunch and then she'll give him a haircut because they've been arguing, and that's not right. At that moment, agents knock on the door, Milton rushes into the yard, and they only manage to see the departing saucer, where 3 Earthlings joined in the last moment. The ship lands not far from the town to safely disembark the elderly and bid them a peaceful farewell. Milton hugs the extraterrestrial and thanks it for the invitation to travel together, but he can't leave his home and loved ones behind. Jules enters the spaceship and flies away while the elderly folks wave goodbye to him. Time passes. Milton continues to live in his home, visited by Sandy and Joyce. The elderly often reminisce about Jules' Harry and hope that he hasn't forgotten them either. And one night, Milton's yard is illuminated by a bright light, and the old man realizes that he has guests. A light, heartwarming, and slightly melancholic film about the fading of human life. It's good that amid the plethora of recently produced nonsense, there are still such heartfelt and warm movies in which an extraterrestrial is not a villain who came to Earth to conquer it, but rather a cute and understanding silent being with expressive eyes. A man named Kevin suddenly comes to in some alleyway. His face is battered, he doesn't remember how or when he got here, and how long he's been unconscious. Suddenly, he sees a stranger in front of him who introduces himself as Benefactor. The new acquaintance claims he can help him and offers the man a job. Kevin refuses, remembering he needs to go home to his wife. Then Benefactor explains that no accident occurred in this world. Calling the police is futile, and they have met far from the first time, because Kevin has shifted to another reality. Benefactor leads the man to a cafe, where it seems everyone knows him. Waitress Tina escorts them to the chosen table, although she cannot hide her fear. After a tense conversation at the table, Kevin realizes that Benefactor is actually Satan. The devil mocks Kevin's faith in God, proposing to discuss his marriage when Tina brings the ordered dish. Benefactor orders her to sit next to them, forces her to eat a piece of food, though she is trembling, and continues the conversation about Kevin's wife, Molly, with whom he had argued in the morning over paying bills. The man doesn't remember this, so Benefactor clarifies that an incident looks different from different sides, because for every choice made by a person, there are countless realities where the choice was different. A choice generates endless possibilities, and therefore realities. And everything a person can imagine in their mind exists somewhere in some time. Therefore, there is a force that can transfer people between realities, swap people with doppelgangers from another planet Earth, shuffle them. That's precisely what Benefactor does. He has already replaced Kevin's wife, Molly, multiple times. The first time was when Kevin gave her a silly pendant, which Molly's copy threw away. Kevin doesn't believe this nonsense and demands proof. Then Benefactor offers to shift someone. For instance, Tina. Benefactor adjusts some device on his wrist while Tina starts to cry, apparently genuinely frightened. Looking back, Kevin sees her weeping parents and regrets subjecting them to such an ordeal. And when he screams for Benefactor to stop, the girl disappears. The devil explains that she ended up in a world where her parents never met, and thus she was never created. So now the poor girl is in a psychiatric clinic. Kevin doesn't understand why Satan needs him, and he admits he's ready to offer the man anything he wants, provided he becomes one of his shifters, people who have sold their souls and transfer others to alternative universes. Other Kevins made their choice, so only he remains. In desperation, Kevin begins to pray silently for God's help. Benefactor furiously screams, claiming he is undoubtedly better than God, and he will never leave Kevin alone. And the more furiously Benefactor curses, the more fervently Kevin prays until suddenly Satan disappears, leaving Kevin in this reality. Horrified at what he has just done, Kevin apologizes to Tina's family and leaves. But stepping outside, he finds the world has changed. Police and strange masks are everywhere, and there are bans on virtually everything. 5 years later, Kevin is still in this reality, where most of the planet is destroyed by a constant war, after which the shifters came. At first they operated secretly, moving between alternative universes and expelling everyone who was inconvenient to the totalitarian regime. Billions of people disappeared, but then came Benefactor, who took away people's hope and faith. This is where he wanted to recruit helpers until Kevin arrived. It was after that illegal prayer that he was declared wanted as Kevin, who refused to work for the devil. After that, Benefactor tried 7 times to make him accept the offered terms, but Kevin consistently refused, enduring physical torments for it. Kevin bandages his numerous abrasions, listening to the Vika Theater advertisement, where anyone can see their doppelganger from another reality, and pondering rumors that the shifters have left this world. No one knows who the shifters are, as they freely walk between worlds and can take any appearance. Kevin's great desire was to obtain their devices for moving between universes, which they wore on their wrists, because then he would have the opportunity to return to his own world. Meanwhile, he goes to work, where he has only one friend, Gabriel. After work, the man goes to the city gray slums, where the majority of the population lives. People here have nothing, not even hope. Kevin tries to do what he can and help whomever he can. The Holy Scripture is banned, but Kevin memorizes as much of the Bible as possible and distributes it through his friend Gabriel. And he constantly remembers his wife and the birth of his son. But all happy dreams about them end in a nightmare. One day, Gabriel wonders if it was worth expelling Benefactor like that, if Kevin never received any divine assistance. Maybe there was never a God. Kevin reminds him of the scripture pages, but he doesn't believe in the possibility of a coming. After such a conversation, Kevin goes to the Vika Theater, whose owner he knows. Russo has been unsuccessfully searching for his lost cat for a long time and is not very happy about the man's arrival, but still allows him to participate in the session. People used to simply want to see themselves happy and came here to forget the bad, but now everyone orders a reality for viewing where they are humiliated and beaten even more than in real life on this planet. Russo doesn't control the visions, he just turns on the equipment. This time he hands Kevin the remote, warning him that his visions are limited by the number of his doppelgangers. And the man starts the session, hoping to see his Molly. He sees himself as a gangster, then a lover, a prisoner, an alcoholic, and suddenly Molly appears on the screen. Kevin jumps up and the session immediately ends. Russo doesn't believe he managed to find his wife, but he still sets a new session time. The man leaves and finds himself in a crowd restrained by police. It turns out, after a long absence, Benefactor has arrived in this world, and the police are shooting everyone without trial who causes disturbances. Gabriel pulls his friend from under fire, and the pair hides in an abandoned house. In the evening, Kevin goes to the store and suddenly remembers how their son disappeared when they went shopping and got distracted talking to friends. The child wandered off and vanished without a trace. Their family couldn't withstand this blow. They started to argue, and Molly became addicted to alcohol. That's when he gave her the medallion with the resurrection symbol, but Molly threw it away. The man runs away and meets his neighbor, who invites him over, introducing him to his wife and 2 daughters. But when Kevin is about to leave, the neighbors suddenly detain him because they recognize Kevin, who refused to sell his soul to the devil. And when he denies it, the girls sing a church hymn for him, bringing Kevin to tears. The neighbors want to know anything about God, and the man recounts to them the parable of Job. Suddenly an alarm sounds, and turning on the TV, people learn about benefactor's arrival for another recruitment of Kevin. Citizens selected for this mission must arrive at a specified place under threat of death. In the morning, Kevin goes to Russo's Theater again. Russo is frightened by benefactor's return and lets the man in very reluctantly. Russo is upset. His cat has been missing for 4 years, and he thinks she will never return, although hope still flickers. Kevin sits in the chair and summons visions, and suddenly he sees Molly again. But in this world, she lives with her mother and a little daughter, and on her chest hangs a pendant with the resurrection symbol. Kevin realizes that this is his real Molly, but Russo doesn't know how to find her, especially since Kevin doesn't have a device for moving between universes. Then the man goes to Gabriel and acquires illegal firearms from him, intending to force Benefactor to return him to his former life in the old reality. The next day he sees Benefactor recruiting another newbie in a cafe, but the street is cordoned off and it's impossible to get closer. Waiting until the police are distracted by a fight, Kevin runs into the cafe, but upon bursting inside, he finds himself in his room. He doesn't understand what happened and goes outside, but immediately armed police confront him and the guy returns to his room. He tries a few more times to get to the cafe, but they open fire on him. In despair, Kevin throws away the gun and turns to God, but instead, Benefactor and Gabriel, who denies knowing Kevin, appear in the room. Satan mocks the foolish man who entrusts his writings to some coward. Kevin is still waiting for the coming, but he is not needed by God, and he will never come to him. So he can live well only by coming to Benefactor. Satan also refuses to talk about Kevin's missing son and admits that among all the doppelgangers, only he refused to cooperate. Outside, a scream is heard, and dashing out the door, Kevin sees a police officer shooting his neighbor. Then they open fire on his room. Kevin falls, dropping Gabriel, but the friend is already dead. And then Kevin sees on his hand the device for moving between universes and realizes that he has been one of Benefactor's minions all this time. He removes the device and instantly shifts to another reality, but around him is a desert. Kevin activates the device again and falls into a lake, emerging from which he again realizes that this is not his world. And again, he activates the device. In one of the realities, he ends up in a psychiatric clinic where several shifters with Gabriel's face greet him. He tries to run away from them, but they open fire. Kevin hides, and in one of the rooms, he suddenly sees Tina, who recognizes the man and asks to be returned home to her family. He activates the device for moving again and finds himself in the home of his doppelganger, who accepted Benefactor's offer. Recognizing Kevin, who refused to sell his soul, the doppelganger points a gun at him and tries to take the device, but Kevin manages to shift back to his bullet-riddled apartment. Kevin sees his neighbor being taken away by an ambulance as passers-by recognize him. The man has to run to Russo's Theater. He sits in the chair, finds Molly, and enters the coordinates of her reality into his device. And immediately he finds himself in a large store where his wife is walking with friends. He cries from happiness at seeing her, but the woman reminds him that the collapse of their marriage was initiated by him. She has found someone else and is happy. Then he sees his pendant and admits that he believes in the possibility of restoring their past relationship. Suddenly, Benefactor returns Kevin to the totalitarian universe in Russo's Theater, and right there next to him is Tina. Satan shows Kevin Molly crying after their meeting and reminds him that he can still bring her back. But in the corner, a broken Tina is weeping, and only Kevin can decide whom and where to return. Benefactor delivers a speech about God, who always lies, promising but fulfilling nothing and allowing such terrible things to be done to people. And suddenly Russo hears the meowing of his cat. She has indeed returned. Kevin laughs at this and remembers all the good that exists in this world, and he decides to give Tina back her life, foregoing personal happiness. Tina's parents embrace their newly found daughter, and Benefactor grabs a gun and points it at Kevin, but as soon as Kevin forgoes personal temptations, that is, frees himself from the shackles of Satan, who eternally tempts people, he is instantly transferred to a reality where Molly is a nurse and a single mother whom he had seen before. He strikes up a conversation, repeating their first meeting, and they fall in love and marry again. He accepts her daughter as his own and later plays with their newborn son. In the epilogue, Kevin says that although this is not his universe, it is now his home, where he has received twice as much as he lost. Inexpensive, but well-written, directed and acted science fiction that turns out to be more of a mystical drama with a religious message. The film is full of allusions to the Bible and direct quotes from the book of Job, and the conclusion is made in the spirit of this parable. But who said that hope is a bad thing?